The government says supermarkets are treating motorists like cash cows as they're accused of overcharging by £900 million.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 4th of July. This is Breakfast on GBNews with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, supermarkets have been accused of profiteering after the Competition and Markets Authority found drivers were being charged an extra 6 pence a litre. In response, the Energy Secretary accused fuel retailers of pocketing millions at the expense of hard-working people.
The government's small boats bill has hit another setback, suffering 11 defeats in the House of Lords. Last month saw channel crossings at record levels, with 11,000 people making the journey so far this year.
Banks are facing a Treasury investigation after concerns they're closing accounts of customers with controversial views. The City Minister has been tasked with looking into it following allegations from Nigel Farage that his account was closed on political grounds.
Venus Williams is out, Djokovic breezes through, and Paul Coit will bring you all the drama from a chaotic day one at Wimbledon and a look ahead at day two.
Yeah, morning. Yeah, it really was chaotic. People queuing outside for longer than ever. You know why, though, don't you? People being checked and double-checked. Some Brits won, some Brits lost, and Andy Murray plays today.
And after the Met Office confirms that June was the hottest month on record, we will bring you the latest weather picture.
Rather showery picture across the UK over the last few days, but it's going to be settling down anytime soon. Find out all the detail with me here on GB News.
Welcome to the programme. Our top story this morning, the government has accused fuel retailers of treating customers like cash cows after a damning report found supermarkets were overcharging motorists by 6p a litre.
So this was by the Competitions and Markets Authority, and it found that last year 4 courts charged drivers an extra £900 million.
Well, responding to the report, the Energy Secretary, Grant Shapps, said it wasn't right that the big 4 supermarkets, that's Asda, Morrison's, Tesco and Sainsbury's, were making tens of millions off the back of hard-working people.
Joining us, the former political director to Boris Johnson. We welcome Alex Crowley into the studio. Good to see you, Alex. Are you getting your knickers in a twist about this?
It's a hard one, isn't it? Because actually, supermarket fuel used to be the place that you would go to get a really good deal. Not so long ago, it was actually independent forecourts that you would tend to find that were pricier. Now it seems this report is suggesting that it's gone the other way. I suspect part of that is because supermarkets have actually been discounting their core products. I mean, I have friends that work in food retail, and they tell me you should see the real cost of food, because although it feels expensive on the supermarket shelf, they're actually swallowing some of the losses there. So they're probably, and I'm purely speculating here, they're probably thinking, well, where else can we find the profits that we need to make? And maybe fuel is perhaps one of them.
Well, look, it hurts ordinary people, doesn't it? People can't often, especially in rural areas, avoid using their vehicles, and to see the prices come down, but that not being passed on to customers will really aggravate people in a cost of living crisis.
Yes, I think so, because fuel is one of those absolute necessities, obviously alongside food, but also it has a knock-on effect to the rest of the economy. So think about businesses that need to fuel their vans to transport various goods. That all feeds through into higher prices for everybody else. So it does have a kind of it does have a knock-on effect to the rest of the economy. And that's why it's a good thing that we have transparency, because the one thing that brings prices down, that is always guaranteed to, is competition and transparency, so the consumer can choose.
So you're saying in this particular case there was no competition, or there was some sort of gentleman's agreement?
Well, I think probably and certainly what the government is suggesting is there should be more information about where you can shop around for your petrol deals. Because at the moment, there's not really one place that you can look at. I mean, where do I, as a consumer, go to check what the price is? And I think there's probably 1 or 2 apps out there that you can check it, but there's no kind of central place where you can go, OK, I know that the one down the road is going to be however much cheaper than the one across at the other forecourt. Basically, most people will just drive to their usual one, and they won't really think about it. And maybe it's a good idea to now start being a bit more of an active consumer on that front.
Also,
I never buy petrol from supermarkets. Nothing deliberate. But why sort of would I go out of my way to go to a supermarket when I can just go to the
nearest
high
one?
street?
Oh no, my husband would always go to the supermarket because he would think it was cheaper, but he's taken to using the sat-nav to look for the best value. So if we're driving from the countryside, yeah, well, Google Maps, whatever it is you use. So if we're travelling from, you know, in-laws back to London, we'll often go out of our way on the journey to go to a cheaper petrol station because it just costs, the difference is significant.
It is. I'll tell you what I've started doing recently, which is a good tip, go electric.
Well, yes, it is, but it's very expensive to buy an electric vehicle.
To get the electric vehicle itself, yes, it's more expensive than a petrol car. But once you've got it, then the cost of recharging is although it's been increasing, it's way cheaper than petrol.
And no difficulty finding a charging point, or
basically you have to have a different mindset with an EV.
Yes.
You have to just plan ahead a bit. So don't ever be in a situation where you desperately need to recharge. Do it in advance, and you'll find the points.
Speaking of savings being passed on to consumers, Ofgem will be today warning energy suppliers to make sure that they don't pull a fast one on all of us today. I suppose the question is, does anyone take any notice of these regulators? We've seen what's happened with water.
Well, indeed, regulators are meant to be there to enforce the rules, and that's particularly important in energy because energy is not really that much of a competitive marketplace, so the regulator has to step in to ensure that consumers are getting a good deal. We still see problems in the energy market like those standing charges, basically those charges that are for the privilege of having the supply in the first place. That's got nothing to do with wholesale prices, which will obviously move the prices lately very up, sometimes down in good times. And so things like this, we want our regulator to be extremely, extremely tough on that, so that consumers are at least getting a good deal, particularly if the wholesale price does start to fall. Yeah, that should be passed through as well.
OK, what are your fuel stories? Let us know, share them with us today, and we'll pass on your tips or indeed your complaints. gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews. Alex, thank you for the moment. And we'll hear from you later on in the programme.
Continuing our theme, really, of motorists, the Mayor of London is to face the High Court today over his plans to expand the ultra-low emission zone known as ULEZ.
Well, a group of 5 Conservative councils are challenging this expansion amid concerns that the scheme would harm local businesses during this cost of living crisis.
And Theo Jacumba has been speaking to people who'll be affected.
For over 60 years, Fowl Farm has been rescuing and rehoming neglected animals in and around Kent. But at the end of next month, it may cost them £12.50 a day to drive their ambulance if the proposed plans go ahead.
It's a 12-year-old vehicle. It's a vehicle that we use almost every day to transport animals either to the vets for routine operations or for medical emergencies, but we also use it to go and rescue animals from abuse and neglect, where we sometimes have to go and collect numerous animals at one time. We're already struggling financially with the cost of living crisis, with energy increases and general food and vet bills increasing, so it's just another additional cost for us.
From the end of August, the ultra-low emission zone will expand to outer London boroughs. A move Transport for London say will help stop premature deaths of thousands of people. However, the plans to expand the ULEZ zone are being challenged by 5 councils in court.
It's not just about those people that are suffering from it, but it's also about, I guess, even those people that are compliant with their cars. Everybody knows somebody that's affected by it. And Mr. Khan will say, oh, it's only 10% or whatever it is of cars that are not compliant. But when you add up 10% of the huge numbers of vehicles in outer London, that adds up to about 500,000 people. That's a heck of a lot of people that are affected.
You've gone all quiet now, haven't you? Never talking to you.
Meanwhile, David's family from Croydon are also concerned about the future. They are exempt from paying the charge until 2027. They currently rely on this van to take their son to the hospital, but a new adapted vehicle with space for 2 wheelchairs will cost them thousands, money which they say they don't have.
Our little boy JJ, if he has a seizure, many times, as any epileptic will know, he has to go to hospital by emergency ambulance. and that problem means that his mum goes with him, but I have to follow on in our vehicle with 2 wheelchairs, mine and JJ's. But after the sunset period, if JJ has a seizure requiring an ambulance, which he does often, I can't afford to keep going to the hospital.
The Mayor of London has said the ULEZ decision has been difficult, but with toxic air damaging the health of millions of Londoners, he says the cost of inaction would be simply a far too high price to pay. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
OK, this is Declan Canning. Declan and his wife Alison run a small business, and you guys see or think or believe or are going to be affected by this ULEZ scheme. Can you tell us in what way? Morning to you both.
Good morning. Well, the main thing is our van for work isn't compliant. There's nothing wrong with it, but according to Mr. Khan, I have to get rid of it. So for us to renew our van, it's not a financial option for us at the moment, unfortunately.
So how old is your van? Presumably it works perfectly well operationally. It's just purely its emissions that are problematic. And how much will it earn you if you try to resell it, and what will it cost to replace?
Well, it's 8 years old, but the problem now is uncompliant vehicles, the market's dropped, and compliant vehicles, the market's grown. So, again, it's just not a financial option that we can afford to do.
So what?
Yeah, because nobody wants a van that doesn't fit the regulations, do they?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So that leaves you, the van's not worth what it should be, and that leaves a bigger deficit as to replacing it, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's our family car as well, which isn't compliant. So we're hit left, right and centre at the moment.
Presumably there's a market for non-compliant vehicles outside of ULEZ areas, so, you know, parts of the UK that aren't sort of highly populated, like London and Bristol, whatever else, Oxford. You know, you hopefully will get something for your vehicles.
We hope so. But again, to actually get the van that we need to be compliant, basically he's making us unemployed, I think.
Gosh. And what would you say to the London mayor? I mean, he will argue very strongly that emissions in the city contribute to thousands of premature deaths, that it's poisoning us all, that there's scientific evidence that emissions can lead to all sorts of things, not just breathing problems, but dementia, heart disease, all the rest of it. I mean, he argues that very strongly. Do you see that side of it, or is it just purely the business angle that you're concerned about?
No, I can understand where he's coming from in terms of trying to lower the emissions as such. But I'd like to see hard data rather than just him telling me that that's the situation.
So, Alison, how would you sum it up? I mean, have you got anger about all of this, or is it just worry?
It's a bit of both, really. It is worry, obviously. What are we going to do come August? We're not going to be able to afford a new van, new car. Declan also has a hobby for classic cars, so they're going to have to go. We won't be able to afford that.
Seriously?
It's ridiculous.
So classic cars affected by all of this then as well?
Yes, some of them.
If they're 40 years old and older, they're OK. But 40 years and under, they're not.
Yeah.
What have you got that's 40 years old? Tell us what cars you've got.
I've got an old Transit van.
Yeah.
Mini.
And an Escort convertible.
Old school.
So the Escort convertible isn't compliable.
So then what is the situation if you've got a vehicle that's not compliant? Then is it a charge, or are they just banned from the roads?
It's a charge. So, for example, if I come home from work, it's £12.50. If Alison goes to the supermarket, it's £12.50.
Yeah.
And if I want to go out in my classic car, it's £12.50.
Yeah, it soon adds up, doesn't it? Well, look, Declan and Alison, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Small business owners being affected by ULEZ, very concerned about the impact of this policy on their business. Thank you so much for talking to us.
OK, so Declan and Alison are a small business owner. They also have a hobby of collecting classic cars. And they're going to be hammered by all of this. Your views very, very welcome. GBviews at gbnews.com. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise on this Tuesday morning.
The Home Secretary is to hold talks with senior sporting and police leaders over protecting sporting events from disruptive protests. Ministers fear the so-called guerrilla protests that disrupted the Ashes will continue for the rest of the year.
Government's plans to deal with illegal migration have been dealt another blow in the House of Lords, peers inflicting 11 defeats. This comes as provisional figures showed that more than 11,000 migrants have so far made the crossing this year.
The King and Queen will be joined by the Princess Royal to host a garden party in Edinburgh on the second day of the monarch's visit to Scotland. The party is a traditional part of Holyrood Week, celebrating the coronation this year of Charles and Camilla.
So what about Wimbledon yesterday? Obviously wasn't there, but if you were there, the security wait was absolutely horrendous, all due to Just Stop Oil. That tennis fans were complaining about all of this, and some people even brought, look, these guys have a sofa that they brought with them and
Very
then
sensible.
dismantled and then put together again and whatever, just to deal with standing in the queue.
Really long queues. I felt so sorry. The people had travelled from all over the place, some people coming as far away as Germany to join that queue and just giving up. And then also being rained on, because it was a bit of a mixed bag of weather yesterday, wasn't it? Are you heading to SW19 today? Will you be persevering, trying to get into that famous tennis tournament? Or are you just going to not bother this year because of all those protesters?
And queue chaos. OK, we're going to be bringing you more of the details on that, more of the stories on that, and all the other sport. Paul Coit.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. I believe we are going through the sport next with Paul Coit. Paul.
Hello, absolutely. Are you all ready and raring for me?
We are good, I believe. You're right there.
I'm ready for sport.
Let's do it.
Should we talk about Wimbledon? The queues to try and get in? See, the thing is, I don't know if you know exactly how it works to actually when people do queue up, because we always know about this huge queue that's always outside Wimbledon every year. But there's up to 500 tickets are always available every day for the show courts, for centre court and number 1 court, and the other tickets are grounds tickets. So you can queue up from the night before. It's actually called the queue, so join the queue. But the thing is, what happened yesterday is that there's so many checks, as you can imagine, with the Just Stop Oil protesters. So they're checking for everything, and it is taking ages. And so some people that were queuing up from very early weren't even getting into the afternoon. Some people weren't even getting in at all. So it really has been a mess, and this is as we expect it's going to be, probably for the rest of the week, because as with every sporting event, this is what everybody's worried about, whereas it seems probably the Just Stop Oil protesters don't have to worry about doing anything because their job's done already, because everybody's so worried about it.
Such a shame. I was thinking about it yesterday. My mum went to Wimbledon High School just after the war.
Right.
In the 50s, and school children in Wimbledon could go at the end of the school day, and as long as they were in their uniform, they were allowed in.
Yes.
Now, the papers are full of case studies this morning. People from all over the world. I was just reading in the Express there about a family from Sydney, queued up all day, gave up. Everything's just worse than it used to be, and you know, they got through the World War, people were able to walk into SW19, and now Just Stop Oil, ruining it.
But the thing is, it's bigger and bigger every year. If you go back the old days, you know, it was lovely when people could go. My mum always used to say that she used to turn up late in the afternoon, and then people would leave, and then they just hand their tickets over, and you go, oh, you can take that ticket. I mean, it's all about money these days. So there's the reselling situation as well. And as you know, as we've both done, is you can get into the ballot, and that's the way of doing it. And every year I've always tried it, and this year I've been lucky enough to get centre court tickets.
I can't believe it.
Which has been great, but that's the way to do it. But there are queues, and obviously people are prepared for it. And Wimbledon call it the queue. If you want to join the queue, and it's even in italics, the queue. But it's going to take time, so be prepared to wait and wait and wait.
Venus Williams, is that the last time we'll see her competing at Wimbledon?
Yeah, I think so. Venus Williams. I mean, 5-time winner. She was, we mentioned, this is imprinted on my brain now, 697th in the world, and it wouldn't have got any higher. She played Elena Svitolina, also a legendary player, but she'd had a baby from Ukraine. She got a wild card as well with Venus. Venus got injured as well during the game, but she's out. Coco Gauff is out. I mean, that's probably the biggest shock. Coco Gauff, whose rise... She came to Wimbledon when she was 15, and everybody was saying... Now, see if this rings a bell, like with Emma Raducanu. This girl is going to be brilliant. She's going to win everything. She's going to clean up. She's the 7th seed, but she lost to Sophia Kenin, who won the Australian Open in 2020. So she's out. Coco has gone. But... Brits as well. I mean, it was a good day for some Brits. It was a bad day for others. Harriet Dart was the first Briton out, so she's out. Jodie Burridge now, she's a young Brit. She's done well. It's her first Wimbledon. She's through. Liam Brodie is through. There was a moment when he was playing. He'll be playing Casper Ruud next. Constant Lestien from France. And I know very little of any French from when I was at school, apart from the exercise book is on the table, Le Cahier sur la table. And then he shouted, as he played a bad shot, he shouted, cadeau! And I thought, gift.
Yes. Present.
Gift, present. And that's what he was saying, because he almost... And that was the highlight of Wimbledon for me, that I actually understood what a French player was saying. Was gift. So I'm going to start saying...
Education wasn't wasted on you.
Exactly. All those years on, cadeau.
How do they
came up.
Game, set, match?
I have absolutely no idea. But if you ever want to know where the exercise book is on the table, I'm your man. Jan Choinski, British... I call him a British tennis player. Polish parents... Grew up in Germany, German accent, so I'm not sure how British he is. But
if he's representing us, we'll take him.
If he's winning, he's a Brit, as far as I'm concerned.
We've got Andy Murray in action today.
Andy Murray plays today. Ryan Peniston, another Brit, 268th in the world. So
Cam Norrie?
Cam Norrie's playing as well. He plays the 108th in the world, Czech player Tomas Mashak. So he's going to be playing as well. So they're obviously out too. Cam Norrie got to the semi-final last year. Very hopeful. But Andy, we've got our fingers crossed. You never know what you're going to get.
The Ashes fallout hasn't gone away?
Yeah. Are you getting a bit tired of this now? You okay with that? You know, the whole problem with the stumping, and I tell you what it has done, it's certainly fired up the third test, which starts on Thursday. The Australians are obviously calling us whinging Poms. They're complaining about this, complaining about that. There was the back page of the Western Australian. I don't know where we've got this because this was tweeted by Ben Stokes yesterday. It was the front page of the Western Australian newspaper that's got... I don't know whether we've got the picture. Have we got it? There's a picture of Ben Stokes there, dressed up as a baby, with a cricket ball, and they're having a go at us. And it's basically he's saying that it's certainly not me because I don't bowl with a new ball. So he's actually taken it as it's coming, but they're really getting into it. And obviously we're going the other way. There it is. Look,
you
cry
described
babies.
it so well, but in picture format is even better. But there on the radio know exactly what you're
That's
talking about.
definitely not me because I don't bowl with a new ball. There it is. But they're really having a go. So Brendan McCullum, who is the coach, the head coach, he's saying that this could be a good thing because it's going to galvanise England. You know, we're going to be very angry about it, so it may actually work to our advantage in the long run, but it's going to be very tough.
Steven Gerrard's got himself a new job.
Yeah, he's going to Saudi Arabia. You surprised about this? You know, it's where the money is. I mean, some people are saying, well, he doesn't really need the money, that this will help him being a manager. Obviously, he left Rangers, then went to Aston Villa, it didn't work there. So he's the new manager of Al Ettifaq.
If you say so.
7th in the Saudi League. How this is going to go, I don't know whether he thinks that we're going to turn things around. They're actually called themselves, they've got a slogan, and it's got "Where Legends Are Found." Well, there's...
Has anybody found any, though?
I don't think so. I think they're still set. I mean, if you look now, you've got Steven Gerrard, hoping they're going to sign more. But where you've got the Public Investment Fund that own Newcastle United, they own 4 clubs over there. Al Ettifaq are not one of those clubs, by the way. But that's where legends are found, apparently.
Anything else found in the transfer window, football transfer?
Yeah, it looks like Mason Mount's going to be going now to Manchester United. Finally
confirmed.
Well, we're very close to being confirmed. Probably going to be confirmed today. £55 million. So that looks like it's happening. Newcastle, Sandro Tonali, the most expensive Italian of all time when it comes to footballers, anyway. 55 million. So he's a midfielder that's going to be going to Newcastle. The other thing is that Rishi Sunak, you've probably heard about. Rishi has been saying that everybody should do like that Johnny Bairstow did when it comes to just oil protesters. But there's one thing I want to leave you with, and that is there was a protest that happened during the Athletics, which happened in Stockholm on Sunday night. Now, Karsten Warholm, Norwegian 400-metre hurdle runner, he's running the race, and then there were protesters. Now, they weren't just stop oil protesters, but these protesters went out on the track, laid on the floor along the lane just as the runners are coming to finish. Now, they reckon on 2 things which they got wrong. The first one is that Karsten Warholm, who's the fastest in the world, was in lane 8, and they were laying in lane 7, 6 and 5. So that didn't help. And also, they chose the wrong event. It was the 400 metres hurdles. So they're laying down when easily an athlete could just jump over the top and carry on. So that's where some of the protesters are going wrong.
It's quite enjoyable.
It was quite enjoyable.
As was the sport. As always, thank you, Paul. We'll have more from you a little bit later on in the programme.
Thank you, my
forward
friend.
to what you've got for us later.
Well, next we're going to be going through the newspapers. Who have we got there
We've got
today?
Norman Baker and Davinia Taylor, always full of beans first thing. Stay with us.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Welcome back. We're going to take you through the front pages of the newspapers. First of all, we have the Daily Telegraph for you. Supermarkets have been accused of using motorists as cash cows. After it emerged, drivers were paying 6 pence per litre more than they should be for fuel.
The Mirror reporting that motorists were charged around 900 million. That's nearly £1 billion extra on the forecourt last year.
Former Health Secretary Sajid Javid writes in The Times that the NHS is unsustainable and has called for a royal commission.
Guardian writes that Labour is considering plans to boost education for under-4s, which include fast-tracking more graduate teachers into nurseries. What the heck do you need a graduate teacher to teach babies for? Gosh.
The Daily Mail says banks are facing a Treasury investigation into claims they're closing customers' accounts because they don't like their views on controversial topics.
And Nadine Dorris is in the top of the page there. Her columns were worth reading there in the Mail, why she handed back her electric car with less than 5,000 miles on the clock. She has this range anxiety, which I think I would have if I had an electric car as well. You're looking at the Express there. It reports that the Treasury has blocked tougher immigration rules as ministers clash over reforms to reduce migration. And joining us to talk about those stories, much more, we have got Norman Baker and we've got Davinia Taylor. Very nice to see you both.
Morning.
Hello. Morning. So, look, everybody's going on about supermarkets and what they're charging for petrol. We've taken this from the front page of the Telegraph. They're saying motorists used as fuel cash cows by grocers. What's your take, Norman?
Well, if you're generous to the supermarkets, I'm not just sure I am, but if you are generous and you pay attention to what the guy from Morrison's has said, which is they used the extra money they got from fuel to keep prices down on goods inside the stores. I'm not sure I believe that, because supermarkets have a habit of behaving like what's called in legal terms a complex monopoly. In other words, they all conspire together and follow each other and don't mind putting prices up. But I think what's happened here is they have seen an opportunity. Whenever there's uncertainty or a new development, then you can be sure that they're going to make more money out of it. That's what happened. And the Telegraph quotes the fuel situation as being one whereby it's more than offset the government's cut to fuel duty, which happened quite recently. In other words, effectively, the taxpayers paying the supermarkets a whole lot of billions of pounds, which it would not otherwise get. But the only thing I would say, though, is to be fair, to put things in context, fuel duty has been frozen for, I think, about 12, 13 years, and actually was cut a couple of years ago, which is significantly different to what's happened to people who pay for train fares and for bus fares, which have gone up way above inflation.
I just wanted to add in there, because you just mentioned that supermarkets can offset that fuel cost and have us pay less for our regular goods within a supermarket. And they're not doing that because we've got 18.4% inflation in supermarkets on basic goods like milk and bread and eggs, you know? And so they are a monopoly, and they're really
Well, it's not
nasty,
necessarily the supermarkets inflating the prices. They would argue that the prices have gone up. Food inflation is driven by rising costs in farming and all the rest of it. Wouldn't necessarily be from basically increasing prices.
I think they are squeezing the farmers phenomenally. I'm pretty lucky because I live in Lancashire, so I go to a local farmer to get my eggs, to get raw milk and to get beef, and they sell it to me frozen, and it is a little bit more hassle, but you get more nutrient-dense products, you know the farmer, you know how the animal's been raised, there is no real transportation costs at all, and you just get a better quality. It is hassle, though, and I think that's what we've all fallen into, that convenience trap somewhat.
Convenience. So you want to take this story then in the eye. 67% of the public want a cap on supermarket prices.
I think it's about 100% of the population want a cap on it. It's not fair. You know, we are there because we're squeezed on time. The convenience of the supermarket is so alluring. That's the problem, isn't it? So we are forced into these places no matter what because we've got 15 minutes to get the kids, get the tea, get the washing powder and get home. And that's the problem. And they know that they've got us.
But it sounds good, Norman. Is it necessarily all it promises to be a price cap? I mean, I think about milk and how there's caps on the price of milk, and farmers just complain constantly that basically, you know, on the point about being squeezed, they're the ones that suffer as a result of price caps.
That's exactly right.
And we also end up with less choice.
Well, if you put a price cap on, that doesn't necessarily mean the supermarkets earn less money. It simply means that they may actually impose that restriction on the supplier, and it may be the farmers will suffer, because that's what they do. I mean, one or two of the supermarket practices are quite indefensible. There's one example where I came across actually not very long ago, whereby a supplier had a deal with a supermarket to fill the shelves in a particular place. If the supplier didn't deliver those goods on time and the shelf was empty for a period of time, then the supermarket assumed, this is in the contract, that the goods had been there and the supplier was forced to pay the profits that the supermarket would have made had they been there. In other words, they paid for the empty shelf. That was a deal which the supermarket imposed on the supplier. I think the root problem with this, and with the fuel, actually, is that supermarkets have squeezed out of business the competition. The independent fuel retailers are no longer there. The corner shops are no longer there. They've got rid of them all by forcing them out of business, and now they're out of business, then they jack their own prices up. That's what's happening.
So what's the answer then? I mean, that's the, you know, we've identified lots of issues here. How does this get solved for all of us? Because we can't compromise on food.
Just to go back to what I'm trying to do is just order it online and get frozen meat, frozen essentials delivered to my door, and just get into that. It starts off, it's a real hassle initially, but then you get it delivered once a month, you put it in the freezer, and then that's there. And that's the most expensive thing in my trolley, really. It's the meat. And, you know, and I just think it brings it back to we vote with our feet. We have to walk away from these guys because they're in too much control.
Yeah. The government needs to make sure that there's a fair deal for farmers and for suppliers.
Correct.
And it doesn't do that always.
No, it doesn't.
If it did that, that would solve some of the problem. And the Competition Authority, the Monopolies Authority, by the way, there's only one Monopolies Authority, which is always slightly odd in itself, by the way, isn't it? There should be more than one. But the Monopolies Authority is involved here, and they need to get stuck into this rather than just standing on the sidelines.
OK. We are having a debate at 20 past
7,
today about banks in this scary, scary situation, Norman, that they could be closing customers' accounts because they don't like individuals' views on certain things.
Well, I'm not 100% convinced that's what's happening. We don't know that's what's happening. We've had people make allegations that that's the reason. The banks haven't said why particular accounts have been closed, and that, by the way, is a problem. If people have their accounts closed, I think they're entitled to have an explanation for the bank as to why it's happened, and they haven't had that. So we don't know whether it's that, or we don't know whether there are more justifiable reasons. For example, if people are involved in some transactions which involve money laundering or dodgy dealing, then the banks...
Sanctioned countries.
Exactly, those sorts of things. And the banks may have good reasons. So unless we know why they've actually taken this action, we can't really be... I mean, I find it very strange to believe that they would take action because of someone's political views. I do think that's quite odd.
What is this politically exposed people regulation that I keep reading about that's being referred to in relation to these bank closures? I don't know if you've got the ins and outs on it, but it just seems that it's been quoted as sort of an explanation for why political people may have been affected by this. I mean, as you say, there are allegations.
Well, my understanding is that that needs to be applied in a very restrictive way. For example, if you're involved in a terrorist organisation, and that's a political decision of yours, or you're involved in, for example, supporting a country that Britain's got problems with, perhaps some of the dealings with the Chinese government or something. It's that sort of thing. I'd be very surprised if people are banned because they have a particular view on Brexit or a particular view on the economy or anything else.
OK. Davinia, nursery schools. More graduate teachers would be parachuted into nurseries under plans being considered by Labour.
I mean, is this going to, like, drive up the cost yet again? Because I'm a mother of 4, so I know how expensive and necessary it is to get them into it. I mean, I wanted my kids to be socialised, so you kind of, like, not only is it time restrictive if you're working, you have a pressure, you've got to get your child socialised, so you have to put them into nursery. And I was just looking at the Scandinavian model, and it's something like about £130 a month for a child, and we pay, like, nearly £1,500 a month here.
The huge taxes, though.
They do, but it's kind of like, it seems to work. Their system is so much nicer, because I've just had a boy, but my eldest has just done his GCSEs, major pressure. And they don't seem to have these exam systems and all these. I'm like, God, now we're going to examine the little ones as well. It's just more pressure, and I think we need to totally change the education system, because university is not for everybody. I didn't go to university. I'm not at all studious, but I've done OK. And it's like, it's just not an option for these children at the moment, and it starts at nursery. It needs to be more holistic, and I think we need to somehow funnel some sort of funding in there so that parents are free to work, and also we have something that's really, everyone's on an even footing, particularly when they're little. They do need to socialise and have fun, but I think our exam system is completely archaic.
I was lucky, the primary school my kids go to have a nursery attached to it, so that just that 1 year preschool year before reception, and that's what I think that Labour is specifically talking about, the under 4s. And I have to say, the standard that they gave of care in that year really prepared them for reception. And it's something that the Princess of Wales talks about a lot. The outcomes for those early years, absolutely fundamental. So if they can improve provision for the under 4s, I think it should be welcomed massively. But of course, there's always the issue of cost.
Yes, there's 2 points here. The first is that there's no doubt that getting kids into a social environment when they're under 4 is a good thing for their development and helps them later on. And lots of evidence showing that helps progression in education as they get older. Whether you need graduates to do this is another matter.
I have no idea.
I mean, I don't really understand why Labour think graduates are necessary for that job.
Well, I mean, I think you could argue that graduates aren't necessary for little babies, but certainly my recent experience of children in preschool age is very, very clever, the stuff that they're getting kids to do, the way they're getting them to sound out words and begin to think about holding a pencil and getting into the classroom narrative. I think, you know, there's a certain level of education. If nurses need a degree, then sure enough, our nursery kids...
Well, it's a question whether nurses need a degree, as a matter of fact.
There's a whole big debate, Just saying,
So we're becoming more stupid, says the Star. Our IQs are getting smaller because we don't eat enough oily fish.
Yeah, well, yes, I can vouch that I'm definitely getting more stupid. So, yeah, fish. No, I do, actually. No, fish twice a week. What we're doing is we're cutting that out. And what my research on it, actually, as somebody, I've got a slight ADHD, and I notice my mood changes if I don't have a ferocious amount, like literally a gram of krill oil a day. My mechanism to focus drifts, and I'll start, like, jumping from conversation to conversation. So it's absolutely paramount for me, someone who's a bit of a scatterbrain, that I have krill oil, which is more bioavailable than your regular fish oil. So I think we need to also roll back that children need fish as well, and we're talking oily fish, tuna and salmon, not just, you know, your cod. So it's kind of interesting that it's, like, coming out and it's in mainstream. So it's a fascinating thing, and it's really easy to do, to implement fish in a kid's diet.
What is a quill?
Krill oil is like krill oil, yes. It's like little tiny shrimps.
It's the stuff that whales eat.
Yeah, they're kind of pink things. Yeah, they're really easy to take, and my kids have them as well. But I think it's a good tip to do that.
I was always traumatised from being made to eat fish oil tablets as a child, and it used to repeat on me.
That's not a good way to deal with it.
I always remember catching the train to school and just thinking, Dad, why did you make me have the fish
And look where you are today with your brain.
So
you're fine.
Traumatised from the fish oil tablets. I don't touch them anymore. Anyway.
Wimbledon, Norman. So we're talking about these queues, and these queues are in place. Security to look out for the possibility of protesters from Just Stop Oil.
Well, do you know what? I just think that you can't always find someone who wants to disrupt an event. You can't, even with the biggest security checks in the world, someone can get through if they want to get through. And all this is doing is inconveniencing huge numbers of people. And actually, of course I don't support disruption of sporting events by Just Stop Oil or anyone else for that matter. But ultimately, I think it's probably worth taking the risk of a bit of orange powder somewhere rather than having these disruptive cues. Same with the Test match. You can't stop all these things, actually, ultimately. You can't.
No, yeah, and it just ends up ruining the fun for everybody else.
It does.
And in turn, that harms the longevity of the sport. People won't bother next year.
Yeah.
They take less revenue, blah, blah, blah. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. Either of you heading to Wimbledon or watching it avidly at home?
No, I'm more into the Test match.
In the Test
I should have been here yesterday because I would have had a few things to say about the
Well,
Australians.
what do you think about Rishi Sunak saying all these sporting events need to be more bairstow?
Well, I think what the Prime Minister said was right, actually, which is that what happened, and I saw it, was, in my view, deeply unsporting. I mean, it was within the rules, but it was deeply unsporting. And there's a funny concept as to what's legitimate in sporting terms and what isn't. But I think that was beyond it. And I think it changed the result of the Test match, and I think probably it may change the outcome of the Ashes.
Mm-hmm.
OK, guys, thank you both very much indeed. That is your Tuesday morning look through the newspapers, and Norman and Davinia will be back in 45 minutes' time. Let's bring you up to date with some more of today's main news.
Sajid Javid has called for a royal commission into the NHS describing the health service as frozen in time. The former Health Secretary and indeed Chancellor claimed both major political parties privately believe the NHS is unsustainable in its current form and will be unable to cope with demand despite record levels of funding.
A High Court challenge by 5 Conservative-led councils against Sadiq Khan's plans to expand London's ultra-low emission zone will be heard today. Many drivers in outer London would have to pay a £12.50 daily fee. For Transport for London has issued £400 million worth of ULEZ fines in the last 18 months alone.
Premature babies across England are to be offered a sight-saving drug, the NHS has announced. The treatment's for an eye disease that can occur amongst babies who are born early or those born with a low birth weight. It's traditionally treated with laser eye surgery.
So we were just reporting on ULEZ there. Kim says, watching your item regarding the London congestion charges, I'd really like to raise awareness regarding this. I luckily don't live in London. However, I really feel that ordinary hardworking people are being put on yet again. Why is it that people who are financially stable have no worries, but people who are already struggling financially now face more costs as they are unable to replace their cars?
Ian says, I've seen a huge improvement in air quality as a result of ULEZ. We have to consider impact on all Londoners, not just car drivers. Meanwhile, Jane says the ULEZ is all about money-making. If you pay £12.50 a day, you can pollute all you like. This is going to affect hard-working people in and out of London.
Right, on supermarket prices, Paul says supermarkets are inflating prices. Any idiot knows this. Windfall tax them for every pound increase in profits from before the Ukrainian conflict. And as regards banks, Angela says, if banks are cancelling customers, isn't it time for the customers to start cancelling banks?
Yes, but except we can't live without banks, can we? I mean, it's like having your passport taken away. It's impossible. On the whole issue of petrol prices, Stephen says, morning, Eamonn, morning, Isabel. I don't think the government website will make any difference. This is a suggestion of a sort of price comparison government website. We can already see it on petrolprices.com. It'll be another regulator with no teeth. Certainly feels as though people have lost faith in our regulators at the moment, certainly with everything that's been happening the last week with Ofwat as well. Keep your thoughts coming in this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com.
So we were just emphasising that the Mayor of London will face the High Court today over his plans on these ULEZ zones. A group of 5 Conservative councils are challenging the expansion amid concerns that the scheme would harm local businesses during this cost of living crisis.
Well, our reporter, Theo Jacumba, has been speaking to people who'll be affected.
For over 60 years, Fowl Farm has been rescuing and rehoming neglected animals in and around Kent. But at the end of next month, it may cost them £12.50 a day to drive their ambulance if the proposed plans go ahead.
It's a 12-year-old vehicle. It's a vehicle that we use almost every day to transport animals either to the vets for routine operations or for medical emergencies, but we also use it to go and rescue animals from abuse and neglect, where we sometimes have to go and collect numerous animals at one time. We're already struggling financially with the cost of living crisis, with energy increases and general food and vet bills increasing. So it's just another additional cost for us.
From the end of August, the ultra-low emission zone will expand to outer London boroughs. A move Transport for London say will help stop premature deaths of thousands of people. However, the plans to expand the ULEZ zone are being challenged by 5 councils in court.
It's not just about those people that are suffering from it, but it's also about, I guess, even those people that are compliant with their cars. Everybody knows somebody that's affected by it. And Mr. Khan will say, oh, it's only 10% or whatever it is of cars that are not compliant. But when you add up 10% of the huge numbers of vehicles in outer London, that adds up to about 500,000 people. That's a heck of a lot of people that are affected.
You've gone all quiet now, haven't you? Now we're talking to you.
Meanwhile, David's family from Croydon are also concerned about the future. They are exempt from paying the charge until 2027. They currently rely on this van to take their son to the hospital, but a new adapted vehicle with space for 2 wheelchairs will cost them thousands, money which they say they don't have.
Our little boy JJ, if he has a seizure, many times, as any epileptic will know, he has to go to hospital by emergency ambulance. And that problem means that his mum goes with him, but I have to follow on in our vehicle with 2 wheelchairs, mine and JJ's. But after the sunset period, if JJ has a seizure requiring an ambulance, which he does often, I can't afford to keep going to the hospital.
The Mayor of London has said the ULEZ decision has been difficult, but with toxic air damaging the health of millions of Londoners, he says the cost of inaction would be simply a far too high price to pay. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
And then you have people who have invested in electric and were far from enamoured. Nadine Doris in the Daily Mail today says, I used to support the government's target to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030. But that was before a pandemic, before Putin invaded Ukraine, before the cost of electricity shot through the roof. Now I believe that the target, getting rid of or not producing any more diesel and petrol cars by 2030, the target should be delayed. The cost of charging electric cars bad enough, but the infrastructure to power millions of them simply is not there. And it's called range anxiety. So you plug in and you're heading up a motorway or whatever. Yeah. This is something I haven't got an electric car.
Football fans, it's a disaster for.
Oh. And I think, so kick-offs at 3 o'clock. And if you need to plug in, finding somewhere that will plug your car and not exclusively charge a Tesla, for instance. There's some of them that will only do certain cars. Getting a charger that's working. So this is a real thing, this range anxiety with people, and a lot of people think, no, an electric car, fine for doing, bringing the kids to school and going to the supermarket, whatever, but not for any long sort of journeys with that. Though electric cars go so fast, so quickly. You can convert old vehicles to make them electric, and they're a completely different vehicle.
Really?
Oh, so fast, really? So incredible. Mm. I mean, but then, of course, that's all your power going after you do that.
Oh, I see,
so,
yeah.
So earlier in the programme, we spoke to a pair of small business owners who are affected by this whole ULEZ thing, and they said the scheme would make it completely unaffordable for them to run their company.
Our van for work isn't compliant. There's nothing wrong with it, but according to Mr. Khan, I have to get rid of it. So for us to renew our van, it's not a financial option for us at the moment, unfortunately.
So how old is your van? Presumably it works perfectly well operationally. It's just purely its emissions that are problematic. And how much will it earn you if you try to resell it? And what will it cost to replace?
Well, it's 8 years old. But the problem now is uncompliant vehicles, the market's dropped. And compliant vehicles, the market's grown. So, again, it's just not a financial option that we can afford to do.
So what?
Yeah, because nobody wants a van that doesn't fit the regulations, do they?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So that leaves you, the van's not worth what it should be, and that leaves a bigger deficit as to replacing it, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's our family car as well, which isn't compliant. So we're hit left, right and centre at the moment.
Presumably there's a market for non-compliant vehicles outside of ULEZ areas, so, you know, parts of the UK that aren't sort of highly populated, like London and Bristol, whatever else, or Oxford. You know, you hopefully will get something for your vehicles.
We hope so. But again, to actually get the van that we need to be compliant, basically he's making us unemployed, I think.
Gosh. And what would you say to the London mayor? I mean, he will argue very strongly that emissions in the city contribute to thousands of premature deaths, that it's poisoning us all, that there's scientific evidence that emissions can lead to all sorts of things, not just breathing problems, but dementia, heart disease, all the rest of it. I mean, he argues that very strongly. Do you see that side of it, or is it just purely the business angle that you're concerned about?
No, I can understand where he's coming from in terms of trying to lower the emissions as such. But I'd like to see hard data.
Well, there we go. Your views very welcome. gbviews@gbnews.com. You can tweet at gbnews.
But after the Met Office confirmed last month was the hottest June on record, let's see what the coming days have in store. Here's your forecast with Mark Wilson.
Good morning. It stays rather changeable across the UK as we head through the next few days, with some further showers to come through today. There will be some sunshine in between, but it will still be staying rather cool for the early part of July. We look at the pressure pattern then, it's still low pressure dominating our weather. Some fairly tightly packed isobars as well. That's what's keeping things fairly breezy. And these weather fronts here that you can see, that's what's going to bring some more organised bands of showery rain as we head through Tuesday. So looking a bit more detail then, we pick up on some fairly heavy showery rain affecting some southern counties of England and Wales. That pepping up as we head through the morning. Some organised showery rain affecting parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. That will slowly spread its way southwards. But in between the two, there will be some sunshine with just one or two scattered showers. And that rain really continuing across the southeastern corner as we head into the middle part of the afternoon, turning a little bit brighter though from the west. Temperatures still on the cool side, like I said. We're looking at highs of 14 across northern Scotland to 20 or 21 degrees in the south. And I think feeling particularly cool underneath that showery rain. Now, as we head through the evening then, that rain pepping up for a time across the far southeast before it then clears away. Elsewhere, probably many of the showers will fade away, one or two continuing as we head through the night, but under those clear skies it will turn fairly cool for many of us, particularly in more countryside, where we're looking at lows in towns and cities of 7 to 14 degrees there in the south. So we get off for many areas to a brighter start on Wednesday morning with some sunshine from the word go. A better start to the day across the south of England and Wales. I think as we head through the day, the chance of some showers developing once again. These again could be on the heavy side with the risk of hail and thunder, but in between those showers, as I said, some further sunshine to come. Winds won't be quite as strong as they have been of late, and so in any sunshine it shouldn't feel too bad despite the fact temperatures just below where they should be. Highs of 13 across Orkney and Shetland to 21 degrees there across the southeast. Quick look ahead to the rest of the week. It stays rather changeable with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but as we head through the week, temperatures start to warm up across the southeast. We could see highs of 26 degrees there by the time we get through to Friday.
Thank you for that. Coming up, we're going to have more on the accusations that supermarkets are treating you like a cash cow as they found that charging 6p more a litre than they should be.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
Well, welcome to the programme and thank you for tuning in to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster. Leading the news this morning.
The government says supermarkets are treating motorists like cash cows as they're accused of overcharging by £900 million.
Lots in store for you. Thanks very much for tuning in and for your company. Here are our top stories this morning.
Supermarkets are facing accusations of profiteering after the Competition and Markets Authority found drivers were being charged an extra 6p per litre. In response, the Energy Secretary said fuel retailers were pocketing millions at the expense of hard-working people.
The government's small boats bills hit another setback, suffering 11 defeats in the House of Lords. Last month saw channel crossings at record levels, with 11,000 people making the journey so far this year.
Banks are facing a Treasury investigation amid concerns they're closing accounts of customers with controversial views. The City Minister has been tasked with looking into it following allegations from Nigel Farage that his account was shut on political grounds.
And after the Met Office confirms that June was the hottest month on record, we'll bring you your latest weather update.
A rather showery picture across the UK over the last few days, but it's going to be settling down anytime soon. Find out all the detail with me here on GB News.
OK, there's been a big petrol row hanging around for the last hour. The government accusing petrol stations at supermarkets of treating customers like cash cows. They had a report which found that supermarkets were overcharging you by 6p a litre.
And the findings by the Competition and Markets Authority found that last year forecourts charged drivers an extra £900 million.
Responding to the report, the Energy Secretary, Grant Shapps, said it wasn't right that the big 4 supermarkets, Asda, Morrisons, Tesco and Sainsbury, were making tens of millions off the back of what he termed hard-working people.
Well, joining us this morning is the former Chief Executive of Energy UK, Angela Knight, and this is a legitimate grievance for people, particularly those who have to drive as part of their livelihood, to see that they are being effectively exploited during a cost of living crisis.
Yeah, I think everybody's pretty concerned about this report, actually. I mean, whilst there is often a situation in which, some prices do seem to stay a little bit higher than they should, in this instance, that really is big money. And it's in the difficulties, there's a number of difficulties here, I think. And the supermarkets, it is difficult to see how they have managed to do this. Firstly, because we as consumers are going from supermarket to supermarket trying to make sure that we get the best price for our groceries. And I do think that there's been quite a lot of more focus on that. But secondly, it surprises me that there has not been the sort of competition that we've always seen in the past for petrol and diesel on the forecourts. And, you know, one wonders why. What is it that has resulted in that competition simply not being there to the extent that the big supermarkets have been able to, I'll use the expression, get away with charging us more? Looking ahead...
That is, Angela, is that...
Well, I think there's...
Why do you think that is, Angela? Is that an accident or is there some sort of collusion, do you believe?
No, I doubt that there's collusion, but I do also think that there is certainly an element of having a look around. I'm sure every supermarket does look to see what's being charged in its area and then come to a decision as to whether it is going to price lower or not. And I do also think that the supermarkets have been far more focused on trying to keep the price of food down and have taken their eye off the ball, as indeed I think to a certain extent we all have, on the price of petrol and diesel. And I believe that there is some proposition which is shortly to hatch, which gives I don't know whether it's an app or a site or whatever, which enables us as consumers all to have a look, see who's got the cheapest petrol and diesel at the forecourt. And I think that that'll help. But we are in a very difficult time. We've got inflation up, we've got salaries and wages squeezed, and in lots of different areas, this is now showing up as areas in which the suppliers of goods and services have not really paid enough attention to. The obvious one that is around is with the banks, where the price for your mortgage has gone up, but what you're getting for your savings hasn't. I can see why companies would want to make a bit more money, but at the same time, they've got to get themselves out of looking just at their own books and their own situation and look more wider as to what it is that's happening, what it is that the population and their customers want.
Yeah, absolutely. And MPs urging banks to pass on interest rate rises to savers as well. And today, Ofgem going to put pressure onto the energy suppliers and say, for goodness sake, you need to pass on some of these savings to users.
I think regulators generally, though, have been a little bit asleep at the wheel, whether it's water, whether it's energy. And I think that financial regulation is these days extremely complicated. And what they can do on the one hand, which is say to banks, you've got to hold more capital, on the other, makes it harder for them to put up the savings rates. But regulators do have a part to play. And I don't think that they have stood in properly over not just this last year, but over several years to utilise their powers and utilise the abilities that they have across a wide range of activities of the companies that they regulate to give the best possible response. We saw that very much last winter with gas and electricity prices. We've seen it, the discussions of this last week or 10 days over water, where the water regulators, who have an awful lot of power because they can control what a water company spends in terms of its operation costs and its capital costs, what they call OPEX and CAPEX, and yet allowed companies to get into a situation in which financial engineering has resulted in a lot of debt and now a lot of difficulty in investing. So it's right across the piece. There's a whole series of things that do not seem to have been operated well by regulators and which now everyone has to pay attention to, not just us, not just you as the media, though thank goodness you're there to highlight the things, highlight these discrepancies, but also regulators, politicians and businessmen and women have all got to step up to the plate. We're in a difficult time. Let's use the powers that everybody has to sort at least the best possible deal out for all of us.
OK, Angela Knight, thank you very much indeed for your assessment of all of that. We appreciate it. Well, we're also joined this morning by the former political director to Boris Johnson, Alex Crowley, with his take, first of all, on that story. Broadly agree with a lot of what was said there?
Yes, except that there is a slight challenge with this, which is that actually supermarket profits have been falling over the last year or so. The numbers themselves look big. I think, you look at a profit of a couple of £1 billion and you think, my God, shouldn't they be passing that on to consumers? But actually their profit margin, the actual amount of profit they make relative to what they have to spend, is only about 3 or 4%.
Yeah, we were hearing £300 by Sainsbury's,
something like that
was the profit.
That is not excessive, particularly when you look at, say, a company like Apple. their profit margin is 30%. So it's of a completely different order of magnitude. I think what's actually been happening is that supermarkets have been trying to rein in the food part as much as they possibly can. Everyone knows, for example, if you're on a club card, if you're on a loyalty scheme of some kind, you generally get a lower price. They want to keep you as a customer. But, of course, they've had to claw it back in other areas. One of the other areas is petrol.
Yeah, and that has been the defence of Morrison's, one of the supermarkets in all of this. But we should point out, Asda was fined £60,000 by the Competition and Markets Authority because they refused to get involved in any of this investigation, which just goes to show, I just think, a sort of tin ear, really, when it comes to their customers, and I think that will go down very badly.
A little bit of a tin ear, and I think the background to that is that Asda started as one of the cheaper forecourt options. They decided, well, actually, we'd like to make a little bit more, thank you very much, and I think they probably led the way. And as always happens in any market, one company puts up their prices, the others look at it and think, well, hang on, we should probably do the same. We should probably sort of keep up with them, and that's, of course, is why inflation is so insidious.
Alex, we've been hearing a lot about how June was a particularly warm month. It also meant lots of crossings. In fact, a record number of illegal crossings, 3,824 last month, which brings the total this year to 11,000. We know the Prime Minister wants to stop those boats.
Yep.
It's not going very well.
It's not going very well, it's through no lack of commitment on his part. He's very diligent on this issue. The problem for any Prime Minister from any party on the small boats issue is, if you actually want to fix the problem, there's a giant red button on your desk and it's called leaving the European Court of Human Rights. OK? No politician dares touch it because they are fearful of the huge backlash, but that is the problem. This is why we saw the Rwanda policy get stopped in the courts the other day. This is why if a foreign criminal comes over on a small boat and, God forbid, does something horrible in this country, we have a legal right to deportment, but then the European Court of Human Rights says, no, sorry, you can't, because they might be upset about their cat or whatever.
I mean, is it all the fault of the ECHR? I mean, the immigration bill at the moment is going through the Lords. The Lords are not particularly happy with what the government's proposing. 11 defeats for the government last night, right across the board, from things like the Home Secretary must consider asylum claims if they've not been removed within 6 months. That was one of the votes there. And the statutory limit on the detention of unaccompanied children, for example, they want to make sure that that's only 72 hours or a week with a minister's input. There's lots of justified grievances and concerns about children, pregnant people who, for whatever reason, are being trafficked across the crossing.
Yeah, look, the role of the Lords is to provide sensible amendments to catch perhaps some of the smaller details that government might have missed. The role of the Lords is not to actively try and stop the policy of the government of the day that has been voted on in the House of Commons.
Well, these changes and amendments can be rejected back in the Commons, can't they? It's just, as you say, it's a process and highlighting particular concerns. But my point was, it's not necessarily the ECHR that are raising issues with the way this is being dealt with. It's coming from within our own checks and balances.
It is coming from partly within that, but inevitably the problem ends up with the fact that the rulings of a foreign court can basically stop the government pursuing its own policy that has been voted on by Parliament, and that, I would suggest, is not an acceptable constitutional situation.
And whilst 11,000 illegal crossings is a large number, it's nothing compared to legal migration, which, of course, was a hot topic yesterday with the formation of the new Conservatives. Fronted the Express this morning, this row between the Home Office and the Treasury. And effectively, the Home Office are trying to limit the numbers of people coming to this country, and the Treasury saying we frankly need it if we want to grow the economy, which, as we've been talking this morning, is the only way to get out of this kind of looming recession and all the problems with inflation.
Exactly. The challenge at the moment is the actual policy of the government is to allow the numbers of legal migration to increase because of the gaps in our own workforce. There are about 500,000 people in this country who are between the ages of, I think, 25 and 40-odd, who are capable of working, who are wanting to work, but who are not in the workforce. And that compares to about 600,000 net immigration. What this new grouping of Conservative MPs are saying, which I think is a reasonable point, is, shouldn't we look to move to a situation where the gaps in our workforce are covered by people who are already here, who are fit to work, who want to work?
We've tried that.
Well, we have tried that, and it's obviously not worked very well. But perhaps one of the reasons why it hasn't worked is because the Treasury has always gone for the default, well, let's just bring in more migration to fill the gap short term. Whereas this group is saying, well, if we have stricter limits, is that not going to force companies and others to look to their homegrown workforce first? And that, I think, is a reasonable argument. And they've made some sensible suggestions. You know, they haven't gone extreme about it. And I think it's an important debate that we should have.
We were talking with Angela a moment ago about banks being told to pass on interest rates to savers. Banks are also being challenged about their alleged rejection of some people. Lots of questions about what's gone on here. Tom Tugendhat, interestingly, yesterday in the Commons yesterday, saying, look, these are allegations at this point, but if people are being refused bank accounts on political basis, that is concerning.
That's a massive concern. The main problem here is the banks don't say why. So when you have a situation where a well-known political figure, who may or may not be a presenter on this channel, suddenly has access withdrawn, without any explanation, you have to fill in the gaps. So if the bank has an actual legal issue, then they should spell it out, at least to the person in question first. We saw a case just over the weekend of a vicar who had emailed his bank, who had asked for feedback, and he had taken issue with some of their equality policies, for example. The bank replied to him and said, well, we think you're being intolerant and we're going to withdraw your bank account. I mean, that's a ridiculous situation to be in, isn't it? I mean, I thought we lived in a country where you can have your own opinion, people can agree with it, they can disagree with it, but a banking service is a service. You know, imagine if you walked into a supermarket and because they didn't like the opinion you held, they wouldn't sell you a bunch of tomatoes.
It's the thin end of the wedge, isn't it? And what do you do if you can't get access to your cash? We have to leave it there. Alex Crowley, really good to get your take on the big news of the day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And with the time at 7:16, we'll bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The Home Secretary is to hold talks with senior sporting and police leaders over protecting events from disruptive protests. Minister fear the so-called guerrilla protests that disrupted the Ashes will continue for the rest of the year. It comes as those queuing for Wimbledon face chaos due to increased security checks.
The government's plans to deal with illegal migration have been dealt another blow in the House of Lords, as we were just discussing, with peers inflicting 11 defeats. This comes as provisional figures show more than 11,000 migrants so far made the Channel crossing this year.
The King and Queen will be joined by the Princess Royal to host a garden party in Edinburgh on this, the second day of the monarch's visit to Scotland. The party is a traditional part of Holyrood Week this year, celebrating the coronation of Charles and Camilla. Very good to see you. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. Next, we will be debating what Alex and Isabel were talking about there. Banks, have they gone too political after Nigel Farage's claims that major banks have been refusing him to set up an account?
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, thanks for your company on this Tuesday morning. Still to come on today's programme.
We have some breaking news to begin with, and this just in from the city. We're talking a lot, of course, this morning about the supermarkets and whether or not they're passing on those savings at the forecourt. Well, the timing and all of this, Sainsbury's just posting their sales for this quarter, and actually they say retail sales excluding fuel increased by 9.8%. That's over the 16 weeks to the end of June. It kind of puts paid to the argument Morrison's was putting out that actually what we're saving, you know, we might be charging you extra at the pump, but we're putting it into groceries and making it cheaper at the till there, is not the case certainly for Sainsbury's. They say that grocery sales jumped by 11% in the last quarter. So that is the breaking news this morning, that Sainsbury's has revealed that they are seeing a rise in their grocery sales over the past quarter.
If you're planning to travel in the next 2 months, at 7:45 we'll bring you the details of warnings that the summer season could overload air traffic control.
Oh, great.
They're looking at delays, 33,000 flight delays expected across Europe.
And what's behind calls from Orkney to become a territory of Norway? 8:45, we have the man himself from the council who has proposed the motion.
Why are they so unhappy? How are they being dealt a bad hand? We're going to find that out, and you can join any of our discussions. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at gbnews.
Now, when you think of banks, their political stances are not exactly the first thing that comes to mind.
So what has your politics got to do with who you bank your money with? The whole row follows Nigel Farage's claims that major lenders have been refusing him accounts.
I think 9 so far. So are banks becoming too political, we're asking this morning, or Should they stick to what they know? Well, the journalist Sam Dowler thinks even discussing this is wildly irresponsible.
And there's Fraser Myers, spiked deputy editor. He says this is a financial war on dissent. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you. Sam, so is this a thing?
First of all, my wildly irresponsible statement was with regards to something not specifically about the banks being political, but obviously in this scenario, our main player is Nigel Farage, and we look, I mean, this is obviously alleged. We don't know. I mean, I don't know whether he's walked into a NatWest and sat down with somebody and said, you know, can I open a personal account, a business account? And they've gone, no, not for the likes of you. So we don't know what it's about, and we don't know what banks he's gone to. I mean, I'm assuming he was quite an exclusive bank like Coutts or something beforehand. And again, they haven't given their reasonings. And I don't think banks should be political at all. I mean, you know, just because you disagree politically on anything doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to have a bank account like everybody else. But I mean, you know, things like, for example, it's just been Pride Month and LGBTQ rights have been, you know, you've seen the rainbow flag on many banks and many, like, across many corporations. And, you know, and some would say that was a political in itself, which of course it isn't. But I don't think you should, you know, your political views should have any bearing on what banks you bank with. But again, we don't know what's happened with Nigel. We don't know what's going on with his, you know, particular dealings. So I think, you know, until we know all the facts, we can't necessarily say that they're saying that they don't want to work with him because
so that
of his views on
specific
Brexit.
case, I accept the argument. We don't know the ins and outs, but let's assume that there are these instances happening. Then, you know, that is wrong, surely, Fraser. You know, then you've got criminals, people who've committed murder, who can still have bank accounts, and then somebody who's a legitimate politician. I've gone specific again, but somebody with political views that people disagree with, you know, being refused access to their own funds.
Yeah, I think this has opened up a very frightening new front in the culture wars, because, you know, it's bad enough that people are being deplatformed if they disagree with establishment views. You know, they're denied the ability to speak on a university campus or something like that. Now we're seeing that potentially people are being debanked, defunded, and sort of financially unpersoned. I know in the case of Nigel Farage, of course, we don't know exactly what's going on. It might be the case that he's considered a politically exposed person under the kind of banking regulations. If that is the case, it seems as if those regulations have gone way, way too far. You know, regulations that are designed to out corruption, or, you know, essentially take a closer look at politicians because they might be more exposed to corruption, is being used wholly wrongly there. Or perhaps it is, you know, political. I mean, it's not a secret, as Nigel Farage says, that the banks are pro-Remain. It's not a secret, as the previous guest alluded to, that they're always covered in pride flags. So if you have a disagreement with, you know, some of the trans policy, for instance, then you're kind of put on the wrong side of your bank, which is quite alarming. I mean, there was a man in Yorkshire who was kicked out of his building society for raising questions about its bank's messaging around pride. We've seen how Halifax, when it put out a video saying why trans pronouns are important, some people objected to that, and it said, well, we don't want your custom, you should close your accounts. So clearly, banks are taking a political line, and that's potentially dangerous for people who are on the other side of that, who are held to have so-called problematic views. Surely everyone in society has a right to a bank. You can't function really without a current account. You need access to a high street bank as well if you want to run a business. And it's not even as if you can go necessarily to some of these new tech startups or to other, alternative new forms of money management, because PayPal has a similarly political policy. It temporarily banned the Free Speech Union. It temporarily banned certain anti-lockdown groups. GoFundMe has taken similar attitudes to political causes it disagrees with. So, yeah, this is a very frightening situation where your political views can essentially determine whether you have access to money or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't just stop at money, or it mightn't just stop at money, Sam. But I was asking you, is it a thing or not? You know, it might get to a stage where people don't service your car because they don't like your political views or they don't like your social views on certain things. But just generally, as a rule, Should business be business and views be views? Should the two ever mix? Or what do you think about having, companies having authority over our views and our lives?
Look, I mean, there's a case that's just gone to the Supreme Court in America at the moment where they've overturned a ruling from decades ago whereby a cake shop can deny or a website designer can deny working with LGBTQ people because they think that it goes against their religion. But that's America, and that's not the same as the UK. We don't put much stock on religion that much in this country. When I think that's a really good thing. But when it comes to going down and using your bank or using your supermarket, I don't think your political views should come into it. Obviously, if you go down there wearing I don't know, some sort of far right fascist T-shirt, whatever, and they ask you to leave, that's different. But I also think I do think it's a bit of a stretch that that simply because Brexit happened, that banks are going to turn down Nigel Farage. I mean, that Brexit happened like a long time ago now, and obviously here on GB News he does have a standing, and therefore he is visible. But I don't think I think this is more to do with things that we don't understand. But I mean, back to your question, Eamonn, I think that a political. Where you stand politically, and again, I have to say that I don't think LGBTQ rights are a political thing at all. I think it's just part of human rights. But I think you should still be able to use the services that you would do normally without fear that someone's going to chuck you out because they've seen you on TV and they don't like what you said.
Well, I believe the BBC has a department. I was speaking to an actor this week who I hope to have on the programme, but was dropped from a drama series and a sort of entertainment programme because after you're booked, there is a department in the BBC that then looks into your life and says, oh no, we don't like their view on this, or we don't like that. They're not somebody we would like on the BBC. So they find out things from your life, and then you're cancelled. I'm actually frightened.
That's like with actors or reality stars. I mean, I have friends that work in public relations, and they have people whose specific job it is to go into that person's Twitter, like way back, and until before they even began, to look for any kind of racial slurs or anti-LGBTQ statements, because simply they don't want to have someone on their show who has said stuff in the past, even if it's like 10 years ago when they were a teenager.
So you'd be in favour of that?
No, I mean, I do think obviously that people's opinions change, but I mean, we live in a world now where if you put something online, especially on Twitter or on any kind of social media, it is there forever. So, I mean, and it will go round forever. So, you just need to, temper what you say. I mean, I think, but it's up to, nobody has a right to get a job at the BBC or anywhere really. Like if they've said something that the company doesn't like, then they have every right to get rid of them.
Fraser, last word to you.
Yeah, I think we can be a bit naive about how quickly politics can change and how quickly the sort of correct view can change. So, if we're talking about, say, the trans issue, a lot of people 10 years ago who might be allies today probably will have made silly jokes about that and could get themselves cancelled. I mean, how quickly the gay rights question has changed in our lifetime, and could things change again? So I'd be worried about people saying that corporations or whatever the correct view is now, as long as we adhere to that, you're not going to be cancelled. I don't think that's quite true. I think anything could happen in the future. Any view could become demonised, just as any other view could be celebrated. And that's why it's important to always back free speech in all circumstances.
OK, you two are now cancelled, but very entertaining listening to you. Sam Dowler, Fraser Myers, thank you both very much indeed for your differing views there. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll be going through the papers with Norman Baker and Davinia Taylor. Don't go anywhere.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I think it's time to go through the newspapers this morning and get a few bits of debate going. Who are we going to do that with?
Oh, well, we are joined this morning by the former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and the actress and well-being guru Davinia Taylor, who's trying to sort me out this morning with
Yes,
tips.
will do.
Didn't have much sleep last night. Davinia, you want to talk about what's on the front of the Mail this morning, and this is also inside the paper, and Eamonn was pointing to a comment piece by Nadine Dorries, and this is the issue with electric cars, more and more people finding them problematic.
Right, yeah. I mean, not only do you have this sort of anxiety that you're going to run out of power, but I've just read, because I don't have an electric car, that e-car drivers are forced to clog phones with 30 payment apps, you know, just to access how to fuel their cars. So I'm thinking, that gives me anxiety in itself. Imagine 30 different apps. So I'm assuming you go into different zones and you have to download their app and then you can pay for your fuel and then you can go into another zone and it happens all over again. That gives me anxiety.
What if it doesn't work? That gives me anxiety as well. And I'll tell you what gives me anxiety. I thought Nadine Dorries' piece was very good. She talks about going back home to collect her mother, and I think it was Lytham St Anne's at Christmas. And she talks about fog, and she talks about having her headlights on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she talks about having her heater on and having her wiper on and having the radio on and
doing micro calculations.
Yeah, and just watching, and it's called range anxiety. You just watch your range dip down. Then you have to look and say, where is there somewhere to charge this thing? And then you get there and the charger's broken.
When you're stuck in Fleetwood or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
exactly. That's the way it goes. Listen, tell people. I want to tell because on Davinia's Instagram on the subject of vehicles and whatever this week, there she goes doing what the rest of us don't do. Goes to the gym during the day and does her bit, but she tries to get her car out of the gym car park. And what is in the way?
Some bloke had decided to block the road because.
How do you know it was a bloke?
I could tell by the reg and the kit on the car. I knew it was a bloke, and I just went psychotic. Anyway, I wrote a note in there, and I outed him, and I said that was selfish parking, joke shop parking, selfish.
Yeah.
And I put it on there, and the amount of mums and I have a majority of female followers, and they're like, yes, it's definitely a bloke, it's definitely a bloke. Anyway, I don't know who it is. I've got an idea because I live in a small village, so we will find out. We'll get to the bottom of it.
But the car that I saw on your Instagram account, it was honestly, it was like it was abandoned.
Yeah.
You know, some people park,
Joyrider.
and some people just
Well,
no,
they've taken the wing mirrors in, so they'd obviously considered their own car, but I couldn't get out. And because I'd gone to the gym and I've gone to all that effort, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to work out. I'd gone to the effort, and then I got stuck in. Anyway, I managed to get out and had a huge rant about
Inconsiderate parparking.
Inconsiderate,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably electric car drive.
So the reason you started talking about electric cars is that there is a 7-year, I think there's 7 years left now before it's the end of all
2030. When
petrol and diesel cars, there's no more.
There won't be any new ones. There'll be obviously existing ones will carry on. Although I imagine it'll become more difficult to get fuel, particularly I might say for my classic car because I'm relying on E5 rather than E10.
What if you got a Stag? No?
A Stag? Do me a favour, I've got a Triumph Herald convertible.
What?
Triumph Herald convertible.
Oh, Herald. Oh, right, OK. Yeah. Is that not a Stag?
It certainly isn't. A Stag was a 1970s
I'm going to Google one of these.
inferior British Leyland model compared to a Herald.
OK.
No, the thing about environmentally is electric cars have got downsides. They cost more to produce in environmental terms. It takes more energy to produce an electric car than a traditional car, so that's not good. It uses rare metals like lithium, which are quite difficult to source. You've also got still the pollution that comes from tyre waste, which is quite a lot actually, from tyres shredding effectively themselves as they go along the road, and other.
Why do their tyres shred?
Well, because tyres throw off pollutants all the time. That's why we have to replace our tyres.
But why are electric cars worse than...
No, they're the same. I'm just saying on that particular issue, they're the same as normal cars.
But where they're not the same as normal cars is they're 10 times more likely to create potholes in the road because they're heavier.
They are heavier, so there's lots of downsides. And actually, environmentally, the thing to do is either to have an old car like mine, which you don't replace, because there's no impact on the planet from a new construction, or alternatively go by public transport. So electric cars are not the panacea for the environment. They really aren't.
Also, I saw these awful pictures in the Congo of children excavating, like, is it lithium?
Yes, lithium,
it's like a scene out of Mad Max. And I'm like, these environmentalists just literally look at how we're harvesting and using children as slave labour to get these batteries out.
The one thing
there seems to be no connection.
The electric vehicles do have that none of these options have, and that is the emissions. And I do think when you're in a city where the air is thick with particulates that are harmful, particularly to little ones, anyone with breathing vulnerabilities, that is one big advantage of an electric vehicle.
Well, apparently we've jumped the gun a bit because very close behind electric cars and apparently much better for the environment are hydrogen cars. Yes. So we've jumped the gun by 2 or 3 years.
So we're all going to bin our electric cars.
This is Sony Betamax versus VHS all over again. Whether you have hydrogen or whether you have battery.
Yeah, OK. Right, Financial Times, Financial Watchdog has summoned bank chief executives to address concerns that saving rates are lagging behind the surging costs of mortgages. So, what are banks doing about the rates that they're taking in and the rates that they're paying out?
Well, do you know, Eamonn, this is just like the story we had in the last hour about supermarkets. Here you have a collection of organisations effectively working together to the disadvantage of consumers because they've got too much power and no one else can challenge them. And what we've seen here, and the Bank of England's raised rates to 5%, we know that. The rates for savers is now an average 2.43%, and the average rate for mortgages is 6.42%. So the banks are showing one face to those who are borrowing and a different face to those who are saving. And guess what? In the middle, they're making a lot of money, profiteering on the back of people. That's what's happening with the banks.
The thing that gets me about the banks, we're closing our high street, our village branch, because people don't want to use them anymore. People want to use apps. No, people are given apps, and they're given no other choice but to use apps. But I think losing a bank from a high street is a big thing.
It's a big thing for people who are dependent upon banks, but it's also a big thing for the high street itself. Absolutely, because once you start losing all these places in the high street, then the high street becomes dead. And of course, it suits the banks very well to do that, because it's cheaper to have apps than it is to have a high street branch.
What annoys me is all these watchdogs summoning in these...
Summoning.
Yes, all this summoning. But for goodness sake, it's like, you know, with Russia, we summon the ambassador, but we don't, you know...
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
When's someone actually going to have any teeth and do some biting?
OK, right. Beer with no or low alcohol is more popular than ever. This is other crap. This is also nonsense. It's only more popular because it's cheaper. Because when you reduce the alcoholic content, you're taxed less on it, and that's what they're all doing.
Well, actually, because I don't drink, I've not drank for about 15 years, and it's in summer is the only time it gets me. I want to sit in a beer garden and have beer, you know, but I don't. But this is the time when it gets me. But, you know, some of these non-alcoholic drinks are actually really expensive. I think it's called Seedlip, and you actually pay duty on it, even though, because it's distilled, but it's not distilled alcohol. So there's something wrong there. I mean, I'm all for driving down alcohol consumption, particularly because I've got kids coming into the teenage years. I mean, God, when I was 15, I was drinking Blue Nun in a park. Do you know what I mean? Real classy stuff. But my kids aren't exposed to that. But I'm all behind low alcohol summers, because for me, there's nothing worse than going to a wedding as a sober person, and by 2 o'clock, everyone is smashed. You don't drink, do you, Eamonn? So do you know what I mean?
I swear, I don't notice it, and the people that will swear to people around me, remember when we went on that pub crawl in Manchester? Oh, God. You know, and you were sloshed in your... I've never been sloshed in my life.
I've tried.
I swear
I've tried to get him sloshed. To know...
No. But people think I drink. They don't.
You've just got that
think I
persona about you. That says a lot.
But also, I'm at the stage where I don't get bored, because I find people who get tipsy quite amusing. Isabel in real life is quite dull, right?
Oh, stop. You are so rude.
But no, I'm just telling the truth. Right, but when you have a few little of those Aperol spritzes or whatever it is, you're a very nice person. You're very
Gets all well, that's why we need to get you some.
You're very good company. And it's her mission to get me drunk. She thinks I'd be a better person.
I'll join forces with you. I'll go undercover.
We'll do it. We'll get it in his drink in the
I did an event with a 90-year-old woman last week, and she made me drink 2 straight Johnny Walker whiskies.
What?
She made me, because as she said, it's better for your voice when you do this. And I, of course, compliantly just said, yeah, OK.
Yes,
so I downed one, and she said, have another one. And
I can't do whiskey.
She did.
I drink kombucha, and that's what I like. I like kombucha because it gives me a bit of a buzz, because it's got good bacteria in it, which interacts with your gut, which your gut is connected to your brain. So I feel a little bit merrier, and I can deal with weddings a little bit.
Does it not look and smell like vomit?
No, not at all. There's like a green tea
cabbagey.
kombucha that's lovely. No, it's green tea. It's really nice, and it's fermented with a little bit of sugar. It's before it turns into an alcohol, so it's not. It's actually low sugar. I drink gallons of it, and it gets me through social events.
Are you sure that man was blocking you in, or were you done on kombucha or whatever?
Was that smashed? No. Say nothing. Say nothing.
Right, let's talk, Norman, about why a police officer refused to attend a shop brawl in the Express.
Yeah, this is a terrible story for Sussex Police down in my part of the world. This is a PCSO, a police community officer, who sat in his squad car and refused to attend.
This is on Instagram too. Yes, I've seen this.
Refused to attend a live crime scene. There was a kerfuffle at the shop round the corner.
Yes.
There was a member of the public being assaulted. Someone had a drink thrown in their face, got punched, and this PCSO said, "Oh, not my job, mate. I can't come along there."
Yeah.
He did a response, "I'm just sitting here in my car."
And the guy said to him, "Well, look, if you turn up, you'll scare them away."
Yes, that's right.
And he said, "Oh, but then I'll have to deal with it.
Yes,
I'll have to write up a report.
Then I'll have to deal with it."
Yeah.
Why officer refused to attend short brawl? I mean, is that what we want? We want police officers and PCSOs sitting in their cars doing nothing until the right person comes along? I think not. I hope that person will be disciplined, quite frankly, by Sussex Police.
Yeah, well...
Can I just say really quickly, lots of electric car users are upset with us this morning.
Good.
Are they? David's got in touch. Fact checks, you don't need 30 payment cards. You can use any credit or debit card. And another one, which I read a moment ago, they need electricity to work, which comes from gas power stations. Sorry, not that one. Oh, gosh, it's hard to follow them. But anyway, lots of people saying that that's nonsense in the mail about the multiple apps.
Oh, right, well,
So
OK.
they're saying it's very easy.
But that would definitely put me off buying an electric car, but apart from the whole mining situation.
I'm
I'm going to wait for hydrogen.
When we're all faced, you know, in changing your car, I still don't think that I would change to electric just yet.
Not yet.
I've got a particular problem with them, and not philosophically, but I actually don't like automatics. I prefer manual cars.
OK, could I say to you, what is the point of a manual car? Why would you put yourself through all that?
Because you've got more control, and also, if you're left-handed as I am, it's one of the few things in life designed for left-handed people. The gear change.
But also saying the lithium stuff, it's all exactly the same amount of lithium is required for a mobile phone.
I know, and this is
Same
the thing.
weight.
Surely someone like Apple and Samsung can sort this out for us, but we do have a choice with the car situation. We don't have a choice. I run my business off my phone, and it's like, what on earth can we do to change the sourcing of this lithium? It's awful. It really upsets me.
And the Chinese control a lot of it as well.
Oh, do they?
Another problem.
Norman, could I just say to you, you're going to wear out your left knee with that clutch. You are. So a man of your age should be in an automatic car.
Well, I did look up your car, whatever, I've forgotten what it was now, but I like the look of that. That's my kind of car. That was a very good-looking car.
When it works. You see, the thing is, these cars are all beautiful, but then you go out in a cold morning.
Wet start, yeah. That or a Land Rover Defender is what I dream of.
You have to pull the choke out. It's an old-fashioned car.
I love it. And then it hops along.
My father used to put a coat over the car engine not to keep the damp
Why did I forget to take it off?
thing as well. Right, guys, we'll see you again in 40 minutes' time. Holidaymakers have been warned it could be a summer of chaos. What's new? Amid predictions, air traffic control could be overloaded. What's new? To tell us more, we're joined by travel correspondent from The Times, Ben Clatworthy. Sorry, forgive me, Ben. Ben, so what's going to be particularly different this time around?
Good morning. Yes, one of the big warnings this year is that basically airspace is massively constrained. It's down 20% on a normal year. That's because of increased military activity owing to the war in Ukraine, but also the threat of industrial action this year is far greater than it has been in recent years. And thirdly, just to add to as much as a cliche it is, that perfect storm, the number of controllers, those people that sit in air traffic control towers, is also down on pre-pandemic. That's because, like so many industries, they've struggled to recruit after the shutdown in 2020.
So grim, the prospect of getting so excited, often leaving at ungodly hours to try and get to the airport with small children, whatever it might be, and then being stuck either in the airport terminal or, worse still, in your seat on the plane, trapped on the tarmac. It's just the pits, isn't it?
But you know what my wife does? My wife has this argument with me, Ben, all the time, about, because I'm like last second into the airport,
me too.
Hanging around, whatever it is. But she will go hours in advance.
No.
You know why? To sit in the bar.
Oh, well, that I can
sit in the bar. Right, so what her, she associates travel with drink, with alcohol. I associate with not waiting around. But it is an awful dilemma, to the point, Ben, where it would give me a phobia about travelling over the summer months, that I would think, I don't think this is worth it. Do you think it will put people off?
I think, well, firstly, I think there'll be an awful lot of people by now, 7:52, that are enjoying a few drinks in the bars at airports in Britain at the moment. Do I think it will put people off? There are an awful lot of people who have to travel during the peak summer school holiday months. It is worth noting here that what we are talking about is exactly as Isabel described there. It's the delays at the airport. It's sitting on the tarmac. It's not necessarily cancellations. It's those delays that are caused often throughout the the day, the knock-on effect of half an hour one way out to Spain delay, another half an hour coming back. Say you're on, for example, the third movement, as they call it, of the aircraft of the day, and suddenly you're looking at an hour and 20-minute delay on that flight, by which point you may have missed your original slot at you will have missed your original slot at the airport. So that's when you find yourself sitting on the tarmac, and lo and behold, the delay gets greater and greater for later in the day. But will it put people off? I mean, yes, I think there are people that have been put off flying because of the delays that they have suffered, also cancellations in recent years. But of course, for an awful lot of people, they do know that it's their 1 or 2 weeks a year in the sunshine falls during the summer holidays when everybody else wants to travel.
Yeah, we just accept worse conditions. I remember as a child how exciting flying... My kids still think flying's exciting, but I take zero pleasure from the whole thing from start to finish. I hate it.
It was a special thing. People dressed up for it.
Yeah,
it was a luxury
felt
type
glamorous,
thing.
and now you feel like you're cattle.
Cattle.
For a long time, my now husband lived in Amsterdam, and I would take one of those roll-on suitcases, and then I'd just be hand luggage, and it'd be super easy on and off the plane. Now you're not even allowed to take roll-on suitcases because you get a charge for it. So there's backpacks everywhere I go now. I hate that.
I know.
It's just everything's
We're not treated
inconvenient.
well enough. Ben, got to leave it there. We're departing at this moment. So Ben Clatworthy is the transport correspondent for The Times. Good talking to you, Ben. Thank you very much indeed. Cruise ships.
It's the future.
Well, I think it's easier because you get on, somebody takes your suitcase, you then go to different destinations and you don't ever have to unpack.
Well, you know what? They're saying that climate change means we're going to have a June like we've just had every other year. This is according to the Met Office.
Stay at home.
Just stay at home, well, look, talking about the weather, let's have a look at what's in store today. Here's your forecast with Mark Wilson.
Good morning. It stays rather changeable across the UK as we head through the next few days, with some further showers to come through today. There will be some sunshine in between, but it will still be staying rather cool for the early part of July. We look at the pressure pattern then, it's still low pressure dominating our weather. Some fairly tightly packed isobars as well. That's what's keeping things fairly breezy. And these weather fronts here that you can see, that's what's going to bring some more organised bands of showery rain as we head through Tuesday. So looking a bit more detail then, we pick up on some fairly heavy showery rain affecting some southern counties of England and Wales. That pepping up as we head through the morning. Some organised showery rain affecting parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. That will slowly spread its way southwards. But in between the two, there will be some sunshine with just 1 or 2 scattered showers. And that rain really continuing across the southeastern corner as we head into the middle part of the afternoon, turning a little bit brighter though from the west. Temperatures still on the cool side, like I said. We're looking at highs of 14 across northern Scotland to 20 or 21 degrees in the south. And I think feeling particularly cool underneath that showery rain. Now, as we head through the evening then, that rain pepping up for a time across the far southeast before it then clears away. Elsewhere, probably many of the showers will fade away, 1 or 2 continuing as we head through the night, but under those clear skies it will turn fairly cool for many of us, particularly in more countryside, where we're looking at lows in towns and cities of 7 to 14 degrees there in the south. So we get off for many areas to a brighter start on Wednesday morning with some sunshine from the word go. A better start to the day across the south of England and Wales. I think as we head through the day, the chance of some showers developing once again. These again could be on the heavy side with the risk of hail and thunder, but in between those showers, as I said, some further sunshine to come. Winds won't be quite as strong as they have been of late, and so in any sunshine it shouldn't feel too bad despite the fact temperatures just below where they should be. Highs of 13 across Orkney and Shetland to 21 degrees there across the southeast. Quick look ahead to the rest of the week. It stays rather changeable with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but as we head through the week, temperatures start to warm up across the southeast. We could see highs of 26 degrees there by the time we get through to Friday.
Now, we've got Johnny Mercer coming up. We're talking about service people, ex-service people, and what the government does to look after them after they finish their service, whether in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force or whatever. They're treated pretty badly, and he'll tell you why after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
The energy watchdog threatens action against suppliers who put shareholders over people.
Good morning. It's just after 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 4th of July, Independence Day in the States.
Independence Day.
And this is, of course, Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel.
So does that mean if you're American, you have a party today?
Yeah, national holiday.
Do we not know any Americans that would invite us to a party today?
No. We didn't get invited to the ambassador's party last week. I was a bit gutted about that. There was a big party in London, everyone was there. What's that funny look?
Well, I will be in touch with the ambassador
yeah, you have a
about
word.
that.
Ambassador, this is not right.
Ridiculous. Don't care if you're invited, but why wasn't I invited?
Anyway, happy 4th of July.
So, leading the news this morning, Ofgem, they're another regulator, okay? So they regulate the energy industry, and it is urging the energy providers to put their customers first. There's a novel idea. So in an open letter, the regulator's chief executive said business practices that led to the collapse of 20 suppliers last year would now not be tolerated.
Well, it comes as the government accuses supermarkets of treating customers like cash cows after the Competition and Markets Authority found drivers were being charged an extra 6 pence per litre.
OK, and we haven't even got on to the utility companies. This is the government's small boats bill we're going to talk about now. It has hit another setback. It suffered 11 defeats in the House of Lords. Last month saw channel crossings record levels, 11,000 people making the journey so far this year, 3,000 last month alone. That's the highest since records began.
Banks are facing a Treasury investigation amid concerns they're closing accounts of customers with controversial views. The City Minister's been tasked with looking into it following allegations from political figures like Nigel Farage that his account was shut on political grounds.
Venus Williams out, Djokovic breezes through, Paul Coit bringing you all the drama from a chaotic day one at Wimbledon and a look ahead to day two.
And by the way, I was at the ambassador's party as well. And today, you know what? The queues outside Wimbledon, everybody's been checked and double-checked. So yesterday, some Brits won, some Brits lost, but Andy Murray plays today. Look at that backhand.
Good man. Nice backhand.
Thank you very much.
After the Met Office confirms that June was the hottest month on record, and thank goodness for it. So
well, a showery picture across the UK over the last few days, but it's going to be settling down anytime soon. Find out all the detail with me here on GB News.
It really is the theme of the day today. Go on, what were you going to say? You want to talk about the weather?
About June, I just thought June was awfully pleasant.
No, but Eamonn, it was really hot.
Was
You've
it
forgotten
really?
already, yeah.
Was it like horrible or anything?
I remember 8 o'clock in the morning, it was sort of 27 degrees one morning.
I just remember it being nice.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it was record highs in June.
You mean it's unnatural? Unnatural practices?
Not my views. That was what was being reported yesterday. But the theme of the day today seems to be banks, energy firms, supermarkets are basically profiteering and not passing on all of the benefits of the current
But is that not what capitalism
situation.
is? Is that not what this government stands for?
Well, this is the big discussion. Certainly the regulators are trying to urge all of the various providers to pass on savings to their customers. Ofgem today urging energy providers to put their customers first over shareholders when it comes to financial stability.
Right, so an open letter was written. The regulator's chief executive said business practices that led to the collapse of 20 suppliers at the start of the Ukraine war would not be tolerated.
And this comes as the government accuses supermarkets of treating customers like cash cows after the Competition and Markets Authority found drivers were being charged an extra 6 pence per litre, which I think equated to about £900 million a year extra.
So let's not fall out about it. It was nearly £1 billion.
Fair.
Right, for the sake of 100 million. Earlier, we spoke to the former chief executive of Energy UK, who said what?
Companies need to think harder about the realities for their customers and the population at large.
The difficulties, there's a number of difficulties here, I think. And the supermarkets, it is difficult to see how they have managed to do this. Firstly, because we as consumers are going from supermarket to supermarket trying to make sure that we get the best price for our groceries. And I do think that there's been quite a lot of more focus on that. But secondly, it surprises me that there has not been the sort of competition that we've always seen in the past for petrol and diesel on the forecourts. And, you know, one wonders why. What is it that has resulted in that competition simply not being there to the extent that the big supermarkets have been able to, I'll use the expression, get away with charging us more? Looking ahead...
That is, Angela, is that...
Well, I think there's...
Why do you think that is, Angela? Is that an accident or is there some sort of collusion, do you believe?
No, I doubt that there's collusion. But I do also think that there is certainly an element of having a look around. I'm sure every supermarket does look to see what's being charged in its area and then come to a decision as to whether it is going to price lower or not. And I do also think that the supermarkets have been far more focused on trying to keep the price of food down and have taken their eye off the ball, as indeed I think to a certain extent we all have, on the price of petrol and diesel. And I believe that there is some proposition which is shortly to hatch, which gives I don't know whether it's an app or a site or whatever, which enables us as consumers all to have a look to see who's got the cheapest petrol and diesel at the forecourt. And I think that that'll help. But we are in a very difficult time. We've got inflation up, we've got salaries and wages squeezed, and in lots of different areas, this is now showing up as areas in which the suppliers of goods and services have not really paid enough attention to. The obvious one that is around is with the banks, where the price for your mortgage has gone up, but what you're getting for your savings hasn't. I can see why companies would want to make a bit more money, but at the same time, they've got to get themselves out of looking just at their own books and their own situation and look more wider as to what it is that's happening, what it is that the population and their customers.
Well, look, everybody's going to complain about their energy bill, aren't they?
Yes, but I mean, it goes right across the board. The sense that everybody, you know, during a cost of living crisis is being, for want of a better word, well, I was going to say screwed, but fleeced is the right word. Nigel says those supermarkets who are overcharging at the pumps, supposedly keeping prices down in the store, are in effect, if that is true, penalising drivers to supplement everyone else. Another pressure on the driver, so unfair.
Well, you see, all I'm going to say is they still have to pay their rent and their staff and everything else. I'm not agreeing with this. I mean, I would want the lowest prices that anybody could have. But what else do you expect them to do? They're there to make money. And I mean, for these, you know, for like the government, we are the friend of business. But then, of course, when business makes money, they're not the friend of business. So it's all a bit hypocritical.
Well, they are, because they're just summoning them. They're not doing anything. Whereas here, Paul says, windfall tax them. Supermarkets are inflating prices. Any idiot knows this. Windfall tax them for every £1 increase in profits. Although Alex Crowley was making the point, you know, the supermarkets aren't making huge profits like Apple that makes something like 30%. It's 3 in every £100 supermarkets say are profits.
But not, they say that. But then who was at Tesco today? Was
Sainsbury's this morning, talking about retail sales were up. Yeah, I don't think it was profits.
Oh.
So it's complicated, and you know they've also got a cost of living crisis to deal with. But it's the ordinary people at home who are really suffering. Send us your thoughts on this. We'll try and read out as many of them as we can.
I mean, you just look whatever bill comes at you, whatever your utility bill, whatever it's your water bill or your rates bill or your electricity or gas bill, they're all up. Then your food bill, oh, for goodness sake, and your clothing bill, and so it goes. Where do we get respite from all of this? Let's talk about the
another type of bill.
Yeah, another type of bill, small boats bill. So it's hit another setback. What happened?
Well, last night, or during the afternoon, 11 defeats were made against the government bill in the House of Lords. And, we saw record numbers of crossings, didn't we, last month?
Yeah, 3,000. This was the biggest since records began. 11,000 people making the journey up until June this year in total. But then the weather, that very good weather that you were talking about, would have aided that particularly. Let's go to Tom Harwood. Tom's our deputy political editor. Tom is in Westminster for us this morning to tell us more. So what does 11 setbacks in the House of Lords do to this bill, Mr. Tom?
Well, it delays the bill, frankly. It means that it's going to have to be pinged back to the Commons, where no doubt those amendments will be struck down by the Commons. Then it will be pinged back to the Lords. Ultimately, the Conservative majority in the Commons can mean this piece of legislation can get through, but the Lords, as a revising chamber, can stymie that progress and delay it. And that's a political problem for Rishi Sunak. We've been hearing about the official numbers, the observed numbers of those crossing the Channel that we've seen in the 6 months, the first 6 months of this year. They are actually slightly down on those last year, but if we look at June alone, that number is up. So the year to date down 10%, June alone up significantly. So the jury's out really if these numbers are going to be up or down by the end of the year, and that's a problem because Rishi Sunak didn't stand on a platform saying let's reduce the number of small boat crossings by 10%. He stood on a platform of saying let's stop these boats. 6 months ago to the day when he made those 5 pledges to the country to halve inflation, to reduce debt, to cut waiting lists, to stop the boats and indeed to grow the economy. All of those seem a little bit equivocal now. Of course, we've seen inflation stuck stubbornly at 8.7%. That's above the trend line that you'd need to see if it were to be halved by the year end. Similarly, the economy has not been growing significantly. It's been growing by less than 1%. Many economists would describe that as flatlining. And indeed, in the latest figures, we've seen that the UK's debt to GDP ratio has soared to above 100% of GDP, precisely the opposite direction which you would want to see it going if you were going to reduce the debt burden. So ultimately, across these pledges, it seems that the government has a big challenge, not least with those numbers that we saw overnight, those official numbers, observed numbers of small boat crossings.
Tom, thank you very much for explaining all of that.
Well, King Charles continuing his royal week in Scotland as he will view the Jubilee Gates at Holyrood House, marking the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II.
The King and Queen are also set to host guests at a garden party at the Palace of Holyrood House. And joining us now to tell us more is royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who's lucky enough to be up in Scotland on this royal tour. If you could call it that, not really a tour of your own country, is it? But you're with them every step of the way, Cameron.
I certainly am, Isabel, and it is the morning after the night before for the King, because he was at the Royal Yacht Britannia last night enjoying a tot of rum with some former yachties who served on that ship when it was in service between 1953 and the late 1990s. There were 3 cheers for His Majesty the King, and the King proposed a toast and said to all the marvellous yachties who keep it all going, you are all brilliant. Because some of these former yachties actually occasionally take part in some of the tourist attractions for the ship. 6.5 million tourists have visited the Royal Yacht Britannia, walking the decks that members of the royal family have done so over the last 25 years or so, but it has been docked in Edinburgh. And sailors in the Royal Navy actually were offered a daily ration of rum up until the 1970s, and post-1970s it was only the late Queen who was allowed on special occasions to give her sailors a tot of rum as a special reward. And speaking of the late Queen, the King is going to be viewing the new Platinum Jubilee gates, which have been installed at Abbey Yard, which is one of the entrances to the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, the other end to the Royal Mile to where I am. And they were commissioned to mark her Platinum Jubilee celebration, celebrating her 70 years of service to the country. And it was by the High Constables of Edinburgh, which is a society really which can trace its history back to 1611 and King James VI of Scotland. And then this afternoon, the King will be hosting a garden party celebrating his coronation alongside the Queen and the Princess Royal to a number of invited guests in the garden of Holyrood House. But let's talk about the weather, because we're British, aren't we? Yesterday, the rain just about held off, but it was a little bit windy. Today, the forecast at the moment, according to the Met Office, is it's set to be at a little bit later on this afternoon, heavy thundery showers, which is not ideal if you're trying to host a garden party. However, we're British and the royal family is well accustomed to poor weather conditions when it comes to garden parties. So that we are expecting perhaps marquees, and I'm sure several umbrellas will be involved as well. But nonetheless, I'm sure most people are going to be expecting to have a good time at the garden party celebrating the King's coronation before the official celebration of the King's coronation tomorrow in Edinburgh, with a grand procession to St Giles Cathedral, and the King will be presented with the honours of Scotland.
Oh. Rain's not a problem for the Scots. They're used to it.
Could do with a garden party.
That'd be lovely, yeah.
Yeah.
Very pleasant. How do you cope with stilettos on a lawn?
I wear wedges. Cameron, do you see lots of wedges at garden parties?
I don't know if that's royal tradition, possibly, but I think the high heels, not that I have much use for them, but I think they might sink into the soft grass in Edinburgh.
We will always ask you the
sure.
insightful questions, Cameron. You know we will. The important questions of the day.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much.
I've definitely seen the Princess
Isabel.
of Wales wear wedges. Not the Queen, I don't think. Maybe the Queen. Not the late Queen. Never saw the late Queen in wedges.
No, she would have worn sort of like court shoes.
Sort of low, black, fairly ugly court shoes, God love her. But yes, those are the important issues of the day. A garden party would be lovely. Are you heading to one perhaps in Edinburgh today or wherever they may be taking place? Lots of them up and down the country.
The time is approaching 17 minutes past 8 o'clock. Time to bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Home Secretary is to hold talks with senior sporting and police leaders over protecting events from disruption. Ministers fear the so-called guerrilla protests that disrupted the Ashes will continue for the rest of the year. It comes as those queuing for Wimbledon face chaos due to increased security checks.
The government's plans to deal with illegal migration have been dealt another blow in the House of Lords. Peers inflicting 11 defeats. This comes as provisional figures show more than 11,000 migrants have so far crossed the Channel this year.
And in the weather, further showers are expected today across the UK, with some sunshine coming through in parts of the country. It'll stay cool for the first part of July, following the Met Office confirming that last month was the hottest June on record.
We're heading to the sport very shortly, but the thing is, I mean, everybody's waiting on a Just Stop Oil protest. And the thing about all of those protests, whether it's at the Grand National, whether it's at the cricket, whether it's
snooker,
at
whatever it is,
whatever, they're disrespectful. They're disrespectful to people who've ploughed all their time and energy and actually using their hard-earned money to entertain themselves. And for many people, sporting events are an ambition. I'd love to go to Wimbledon, I'd love to go to the National, wherever they go, and then these things are upset by these protesters. So disrespectful, how would you describe protests at sporting events?
They get asked that all the time, don't they? And they come back and say, sorry, we know that it's inconvenient, we know that it's a pain, it's deliberate. That's they're doing that because they think this is a crisis, that this is the only way they can get the message across. But as you say, it probably does more to harm their public sympathy for their causes than good. Let us know what you think on all of this. GBViews at gbnews.com.
Paul next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Still to come on the programme this morning, what's behind calls from Orkney to become a territory of Norway? Find out at 9:15 when we speak to the council leader who has proposed the motion.
I think we should have been in Orkney today. Don't know how you get there, but I'd go.
It's not easy. It's a long way away.
Younger generation, are they getting more boring?
Yes. I'm not sure what time we're doing this because that's the same time as the Orkney story. But we'll be talking about the influencers building massive followings out of early nights, 5 a.m. workouts and tips to Starbucks. From memory, I think it's about 9:20 we're doing that. And let us know your thoughts on any of the big topics.
Tell you what my thoughts are.
Go on.
I was just wondering, although it's news to me, I might always have been boring in my life.
And you're the one who calls me boring all the time.
No, but see, in my mind, I don't think I am boring. I mean, I sit with a fellow bore, Paul Coit here, and we relive 70s children's programmes. So we sit and talk about those. I thought it was the most exciting period of my life.
It's such a cute little bromance that you two have. It's like your happy place.
He's my best mate. He's my. We talk sport, we talk football, we talk
adverts,
TV
singing,
programmes,
music,
adverts,
songs, popular culture from the days.
Sweeties that there used to be. Do you remember Spangles?
Yeah, of course I remember Spangles. Yeah.
They don't have those anymore.
Why did they not? Because that's like were they all fizzy? A little bit fizzy. Had a little dip in them, didn't they? Like square, with a little dip. Just tick. Your tongue would just fit in the Spangle.
Opal fruits, and then they had opal mints, which were hideous.
Well, Opal fruits changed their name though, didn't they?
They changed.
Starburst.
Yeah.
It's like with Marathon changing it to become Snickers.
Made to make your mouth.
Made to make your mouth.
They're off.
Something with the tang of citrus, 4 refreshing fruit flavours: orange, lemon, lime, and I've forgotten.
And
blackcurrant.
Probably, yeah.
Anyway, let's look through the back pages, which is why he's here for this morning.
Is that why I'm here?
Here we go. This Burstow incident. Brendan McCullum warns Australia they'll regret it over the controversial wicket. I don't think so. In the Telegraph, Venus Williams is defeated in the first round at Wimbledon, which could be her farewell. And in the Express, Mauricio Pochettino has claimed it was an easy decision to become manager of Chelsea because they have been the best team in England for, like 1,000 years or something, isn't it?
Oh, something like that. He's coming out with
he's giving it
the old business, isn't he? He's giving it the old flannel. You know, here I am, here at Chelsea. They've been the best team for the last 15 years. Maurizio telling Chelsea fans what they want to hear. We'll see, Maurizio. We'll see how things go.
Yeah, I think you've got a very good manager.
I do as well. I do. I think Ange Postecoglou. I think now it's the point where Spurs fans, if they could change, everybody wanted Mauricio Pochettino to come back in. Now it's like, although there's no games been played whatsoever, it's like, yeah, we'll take Ange. And when Mauricio then comes back to Spurs, I don't think the welcome's going to be quite as friendly as maybe it could be.
Yes, I think you're right.
We will see.
I think you're right there. Now, Wimbledon, day one of action yesterday. Isabel, when you were young, because this was me when I was a kid, you wanted to... I always wanted a racket which was called a Dunlop Fort racket, a wooden racket at the time, and then you got a frame for your racket.
Yes.
To hold your racket. I mean, that was an...
They click together and hold it.
Yeah.
Was it just to keep it so it wouldn't warp? Is that the reason?
So it wouldn't warp in the wet and things like that. Did you ever get anything in preparation for Wimbledon?
I definitely was inspired by watching Wimbledon growing up. I still am, actually. It makes me want to get out there and practice my backhand every now and then. But yesterday was a bit of a funny old day, really. Djokovic, I mean, he was interrupted by the rain a lot and he was trying to dry his shoes and talk us through day one.
Well, it was a bit strange because Novak Djokovic came out and he hasn't lost. You know, the last time he lost on the centre court was when he lost the final against Andy Murray back in 2013. So 10 years, won every game on centre court that was played.
What pressure is that?
You know...
He likes the pressure.
I think he does. I don't think he would feel the pressure of, I've got to keep this going, I've got to keep this going. I just think he...
Just a machine.
He is a machine, and I think he will win this year as well. I think he's going to break the record, which will be... He'll be up there with Federer, with the 8 wins, and also will be 24 Grand Slam wins, which will be up there with Margaret Court. So, the most successful tennis player. I don't see why he won't do it. But he was on centre court. You're right, the rain came down. They took a touch because the roof takes ages. You know, it's one of these, like, slow. So they finished the set. And then the ground was a little wet, so they wanted to play on. The crowd are thinking, come on, we want to get on with this. Yeah. So they come out with those leaf blower things. You know, you'd
dry like a hairdryer.
Well, that's it. But, you know, you think, like, with all the technical advances over the years, then these grounds would come up with these leaf blowers, and then there was Novak who was dabbing the ground as well with his towel. So eventually they got going, and then he came through in straight sets, and I think that's how it's going to continue as well for the rest of the tournament. I can't see him going anywhere apart from the final.
Technical description of said leaf blower.
There we are. There's the leaf blower. We all have one of those in the back garden.
Folded. Well, I wish I did.
They suck and they blow those things, but there we are. I think they had it on blow that day.
Yes. And
right.
they're very noisy.
Venus Williams. Oh dear.
Yeah, Venus. Well,
she's history. That's all.
She is. I mean, we can't expect Venus to go very far these days.
But it's sad to see someone of that calibre on the ground.
Going out that way.
Yeah.
See. This is a discussion we've had a few times. When do you bow out? When you're a top sports person, do you bow out of the top and think, right, that's it, I'm now going to walk away? Well, I mean, we could look at Andy Murray. But Andy Murray still plays, and he begins his, should we say, campaign today. Yeah. He plays today on centre court. At what point do you think enough is enough? Is it because you're injured and you can't play, or is it because you're not actually reaching the heights you used to? I mean, he loves to do it.
Sure.
So it's the same with Venus,
and there is that other thing, Isabel, I think, with all professional sports people. You will so miss it when it's gone.
Yeah, it's an addiction. It's a lifestyle. Yeah. It's a joy. And, yeah, finding the right moment to bow out must be really hard.
But that's it.
Footballers as well.
But it is, you're right, it's a lifestyle. There's the joy is the competing, but the work that goes on around it and the training, but then that's a regular thing.
Juan
get up at the same
Mata
time.
retired this week.
Yeah, and another one. So, I mean, he's a very smart man. He's someone that's always going to do very, very well for himself, whatever happens.
As well.
But there are some athletes or players in whatever sport they do will come out of it and then they think, well, what do we do now? What happens to me?
What you can do after you've been top of your game, played for your country, whatever else it is, you can become, you know, an icon, a pin-up.
Yeah.
A la David Beckham.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
And he obviously is famous through, I don't know, was it the noughties, the 90s, for all his various haircuts. I mean, he still is a style icon, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's been talking about some of the looks that he regrets.
Yes, he has. Now, he has been talking about that. There's a few haircuts. One was the cornrow haircut. I think we've got the cornrow. There we are. Oh, no, that's him.
That's him
now. There he is. That's him now. And that's the famous game against Argentina in France, where he got sent off and it was all a disaster.
It's the picture in the middle.
There we are. There's the cornrow. Yeah, that's the one in the middle. And this one he regrets. He had that done 2 days before he met Nelson Mandela. This is back in 2001. And I think it was a friend of Victoria's and he wanted a new haircut. What shall I do? Said it's quite painful.
Decided, let's be honest.
I think, let's face it, it all did change after he met Victoria, whether it be for the better.
But it was plaited, that hairstyle.
It is plaited, yeah, there we are. So there's that one. There's another one as well. There's the other famous... There's the Mohican.
Bit thuggish looking.
It is, and as you know, I think it was Alex Ferguson said that's got to come off.
Oh, look at that one. I don't like that.
Yeah, you're not playing for mighty. There's that one. And I think we've got a mullet. I think he did actually wear a mullet at one point as well.
Oh,
there we are. There's the David Beckham mullet there. But that's probably the thickest fight. That's the good.
I think we should get someone in AI or something to put David Beckham's haircuts on that picture of Eamonn and just see some cornrows.
I'd carry them. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I provide a figure of fun.
Always.
But then there was an advert, wasn't there?
Oh,
finger of fudge is just
enough to give your kids a treat.
A finger of fudge is just enough until it's time to eat.
It's full of Cadbury goodness and very something indeed.
A finger of fudge is just enough to give your kids a treat.
You too. It's like Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
If only we could be sponsored by the chocolate company, we'd be making, we're giving free adverts all the way through
that's
this.
what we should do for the sport. Maybe
Do you? Does it give you a little treat every time you have it?
I do, yes. I like a fudge.
I know you do. I know you do. I know. I can.
Anyway, they just come. These hits after hits.
Right.
Right. Steven Gerrard.
Yes.
He's gone off to Saudi Arabia to be a manager there.
Steven Gerrard. We didn't know he was going to go, and he did give the impression that he wasn't going to go to Saudi Arabia because what do? You know, you an icon. We're talking about football icons. He was at Rangers, and it never worked out at Aston Villa. So where do you go after that? It was always being touted that he'd be the next Liverpool manager, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So Saudi side El Ettifaq have decided that he is who they want. Their slogan is "Where legends are found." Although he's the only legend that we've actually found there so far. Yeah. He's only just joined.
I'm sure the payday will be very good for him, but where it went wrong for him, I think, was Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Not what he did there, but what the next guy, what's his name?
Emery.
Emery. What he has done with Villa. That's the thing.
Because he's done so well.
Correct. That's what I think.
Off the back. See, it was problems often when you lose the dressing room. That's the old phrase, if you lose the dressing room, which years ago probably didn't count because you'd get players would look up to managers, like teachers or parents, and they'd do as they were told. So much money involved, so much power involved in players. If you lose them, then they know that they can just think, well, if we don't play very well, the manager will go before me. So it seemed that there was personality difficulties there with Steven Gerrard. So now he's gone over there. Well, where does he go next? Or is he actually even thinking there's a long-term plan? Let's just make the money and enjoy ourselves. Why not?
Thank you. We're probably going to hear from Man U today about Mason Mount to probably confirm.
I think that's going to happen today.
Yeah, that he's going to happen. Paul, lovely talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right, coming up, we're going to have the latest for you on the unrest in France as we go through the papers with Norman Baker and Davinia Taylor.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
8:37 is the time. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, welcome to Breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Let's take a look at the front pages, how they're shaping up. The Daily Telegraph this morning going with supermarkets being accused of using motorists as cash cows after it emerged drivers were paying 6 pence per litre, more than they should be for fuel.
How do you feel about that? Are you incensed? Let us know. Mirror reports motorists were charged around 900 million extra on the forecourts last year.
Here's the Times. They've got a op-ed inside, an opinion piece by the former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, saying that the NHS is unsustainable and he's calling for a Royal Commission to look at alternatives.
You see, I think that's an interesting story. I'm going to ask Norman Baker about that shortly. Guardian writes that Labour's considering plans to boost education for under fours. That includes fast-tracking more graduate teachers into nurseries.
The Daily Mail says banks are facing a Treasury investigation into claims they're closing customers' accounts because they don't like their views on controversial topics. Lots of people have been emailing me saying, why are you calling the views controversial? I'm reading a quote there. That's not my opinion. That's what the paper's saying, that it's
what was controversial?
If the article scroll up, I'll give you the quote again. Sorry, back where we were, to the Telegraph. So the quote was, because they don't like their views on controversial topics. And lots of people are saying, Farage's views aren't controversial. It wasn't my opinion. I was just quoting.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's basically anything they don't like can be termed as controversial, can't it? Now, here's a couple of things I have just from those headlines. Why do you need graduates parachuted into nursery schools? Why would you need a graduate?
The experts apparently say that the early years are really vital as the building blocks for going into primary school. And if you can get graduates, it can really help with speech and language, social development, and the building blocks for phonetics, for writing. And there's lots of evidence to support that, not just from this country, but from other countries as well.
I bet you can do all that without being a graduate. But anyway, I'm just interested. Now, what was I going to ask you about? I forgot about it.
Was it the Health
Royal Commissioner,
Sajid Javid saying the NHS really not fit for purpose, it's unsustainable. I don't know what a Royal Commission is or what it can actually sustain. What's the difference between a Royal Commission and a public inquiry?
Well, a Royal Commission's slightly higher status. It costs more money and takes longer, essentially.
Another waste of time.
Well, maybe so. That's a very cynical view, but you might be right. But it's there to depoliticise a serious issue. So the idea, I suppose, that Sajid Javid got, I don't know, is that a Royal Commission would be a way of taking politics out of the NHS and looking at the issue of the NHS.
So Sajid Javid would never say that when he was Health Secretary?
Well, he couldn't, because in government, as a minister, I know this from my own experience, you are governed by collective responsibility.
Right.
So unless the government
But this guy steps back from this and he thinks, I was given a mission impossible task. This thing is just a crazy house. This just can't work.
Well, yes. What I would say about Royal Commission is it will take 10 years to set up and report. I mean, it's not a short-term solution. So, I mean, it does depoliticise it, but whether or not that's the right answer,
What do you think Sajid Javid's up to? Because he's also talking about how he would like to reform the Commons. He wants to halve the number of MPs but double their pay to improve the calibre of candidates. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's nonsensical, to be honest with you. Look, I mean, I spent 18 years as an MP. I'm not asking for sympathy, but I worked about 65, 70 hours a week and dealing with my constituency. And the idea you have twice as many people to look after as you do at the moment, the consequence would be that it's just impossible. You couldn't do your job properly. So I think the idea of cutting the number of MPs is simply wrong. What you should do is cut the number of peers. We've got the second largest chamber in the world, unelected chamber, after the Chinese rubber stamping arrangements. And there's 800, 900 peers. That's an obscenity in terms terms of democracy. So we'll cut the number of peers of the ANZs and not the MPs.
OK. Davinia, from your point of view, you have your eye on a number of health stories today. I want to go to this one ×2. And it says, when you exercise, intense workouts can curb your appetite in a similar way to weight loss jabs.
Yeah, so the new weight loss jabs that are coming out, like Ozempic and I think it's called Wegovy as well, they the mechanisms that they work by is to do with the hormone GLP-1, which sort of triggers satiety, so you don't feel as peckish. You know, that's how that mechanism is working. But they're also saying that exercise can induce that GLP-1 hormone as well. But what I find irritating about this is it's now saying that if you're ravenous after exercise, here's how to control your cravings. What these guys are doing again, which is my bugbear, is they're giving people basically sugar for breakfast in the morning. So you've got porridge, a cereal bar and yogurt at 8:30. Then you do a 30-minute workout, and then of course you're going to be hungry because your insulin's dropped. Right. We need to change the rhetoric and start people fueling on fat for satiety, and then you don't need all these drugs going into your system.
So what would instead of cereal for breakfast, what would my fat breakfast be?
So that would be bacon, eggs, avocado, no bread. You could have, I actually manufacture this stuff. It's called MCT oil. It's a medium-chain triglyceride that you put in your tea and your coffee. You whiz it up, it goes like a cream, and then you drink that. Now, what happens is that MCT oil molecule hits your liver, shoots up to your brain, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and gives your brain ketones as a fuel instead of glucose, and they last all day.
No,
so you don't snack.
I get that. But if I were you, or to be you, you would have to be, in days of old, you would be burnt at a stake.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you would be seen as a witch, and, you know, you have this compound and everything, these recipes that you make up. You've got to be basically that intense, that serious about how you fuel your body and how...
If you start with fat as a fuel during the day, you'll burn fat and you will crave less, because if you start your fuel with carbohydrates, it turns to sugar and you're going to be seeking sugar for the rest of the day. Kind of like the Atkins, but, I mean, I have carbohydrates at night because they make you sleepy, and that makes me have a really nice deep sleep, a carb coma. So it's about timing the carbohydrates. Nothing's, nothing's off the menu, of course, but it's about making yourself get ahead of the craving.
All of that makes sense. All that makes sense. Very good. Norman, fundraising, this is the Times, a fundraising campaign for the French police officer who shot that young lad in Marseille. What's going on there, and why is there a need to raise money for the officer himself?
Well, there isn't really a need to raise money, is the truth of the matter, and I'm afraid this reflects on the fact that France is, in racial terms, somewhat dysfunctional, because one of the reasons why this money's been raised, it's been put forward, the idea by a TV pundit, is because many people feel that the police are, quote, just from the Times, a bastion against an Arab and black African minority from the Banlieue estates, from the suburbs. €1 million raised for this officer, who has been charged with voluntary manslaughter, who has actually apologised for the shooting, so therefore I suppose he's accepted responsibility for it, and far less raised for the victim who was actually shot. And it doesn't reflect well on French society, I'm afraid.
Well, the victim, of course, is dead, but for the family, €189,000 raised for the family, and the Jean Messia, this populist right-wing pundit, setting up this crowdfunding and getting, as you say, €1 million for the police officer. I mean, presumably that will go towards legal fees, his defence.
It's a lot of legal fees, isn't it? $1 million. I just think it's... I'm afraid it's those who've contributed in some way are supporting the idea that the guy was shot. That's what it comes down to.
You know, you relive, and I mean, who knows, we weren't there, but we've all seen the footage of the officer discharging his weapon into that young lad's chest. And even if he had to discharge his weapon, you sort of think, well, why couldn't you have shot him in the leg?
Yeah.
This is the same about America. This is why, actually, I'm going to say that I'm really pleased to be in this country, because the police in this country are far more sensitive about the use of arms. And, in fact, the police often say we don't want to be armed because if we're armed, the criminals will be armed. Yeah. That's the police. But very sensible response from the police in this country. And yet we see in America in particular, but also apparently in France, policemen feel apparently they can shoot people almost without any comeback.
Wasn't the argument that the officer was not aiming for, I think, was it his head or his chest, but that because he accelerated, even though they had said, do not move, get out of the car, whatever, and he refused, and as he accelerated, then I mean, that's perhaps a spurious defence.
He was very, very
Yeah.
close. There was like no room for error. I mean, he was so close. He couldn't have missed his chest.
No.
It was
But
just
there's no
very
reason to shoot him
strange.
at all. And you know, if you have to stop somebody, why don't you use a taser or something which
Well, that's what we would
incapacitates
do
them?
in this country. Shall we talk about the mineral phosphorus?
Yes.
Davinia, and you found this in the Mail, page 32.
Yeah, I mean, I make it sort of my business to write about these enzymes that work together. So they're called coenzymes. So what they've got in the Mail is that the mineral phosphorus, which is in every cell in our body, the highest concentrations are in our bones, so particularly beneficial for people over a certain age, is great with vitamin D. But do you know what drives me mad? Vitamin D, it's saying here you should get your vitamin D from fortified breakfast cereals. And I'm not joking, you get vitamin D from sunshine. It's so much easier to get the right 5 minutes in the morning.
In summer, maybe.
But even just being exposed, we put so much SPF on us all the time, 24/7. I think the New York Times says no amount of sun is healthy. Are you kidding me? Vitamin D is a God-given...
You're a beautiful amber colour. Is that natural? Is that real?
That's real. We had a bit of a heat wave, which I was...
Because you're outside.
Outside all the time. I run every single day, and I just make it my mission to keep the kids outside, and we are outside in our T-shirts the minute it gets warmer, and I just build up a natural tan to it. I think there will be something out soon that will say, actually, we need vitamin D naturally. The cholesterol in your body, under your skin, gets the sunlight and it converts to vitamin D, and that makes you absorb phosphorus, making your bones stronger.
OK,
right. Just before we wrap the papers, I just want to ask Norman his view very quickly on the story about Orkney as a Scottish man yourself.
Yes, indeed.
Would you be sad to see them go?
Well, of course I would be sad to see them go, but Orkney feels it doesn't get the money which it should do from either Westminster or from Edinburgh. It feels it's neglected, I understand. And it also harks back to the fact that it used to be under Norwegian control until 1472. And I've just been up to Thursday, as you may know, on the train. So there's a different feel up the north of Scotland than in the islands. And you have to bear in mind that when you become an MP, they ask you to write down, for travel purposes, your nearest station, your nearest railway station. And the MP for Orkney and Shetland put down quite correctly Stavanger. That was his nearest station.
Goodness me, goodness me. Well, look, we're going to now speak to James Stockan.
Thank you.
James is the Orkney Council leader. He'll tell us. James, good morning to you.
Good morning.
James, very good to see you. And you know what, my friend? I've never been to Orkney. Isabel hasn't been, and we're both thinking, well, why have we not been? But the thing is, we're still...
I think it's high time you corrected that. I think everybody
before you
should
join
come to
Norway,
Orkney to get a
before
unique
we need our
experience.
passports to get there. But the thing is, James, when we heard that there was this rift, that there was this problem that you felt underappreciated, we were a bit concerned. We sort of think, well, why would this be? In what areas do you feel really hard done by?
Well, we've got one or two real challenges, and it seems really crazy that we don't get the same funding that the other two island groups get. Shetland get £350 per person, more than us from the Scottish Government, and the Western Isles get £700 per person more than we get in Orkney to provide the same services. That's been a long-term historical challenge. But our biggest thing that's on the cards at the moment is we are needing to replace the ferries that go between our islands. And all our ferries now are, the youngest one is 27 years old. And we've been asking government for the last 15 years for support to replace these. And we've got nowhere with that at all.
What makes you think that being having closer links to Norway would make the ferry service or any of those issues any better?
Well, we look at Norway and we see that they have a very good attitude towards the remote and rural. They are looking at, the decarbonising agenda for their ferries. They've got some unique opportunities there. And so we very much appreciate what they're doing. And we say, well, can we be supported by them, and can we support them in the things we're doing in the renewable industry?
See, we're looking at a map now, James, and we see well, we were seeing your area there, and then further to the northeast is Shetland. They're even more remote than than you are. Have you heard any grievances from Shetland?
Well, Shetland, as I said before, do get more funding than us as an archipelago, but there are still some strong links between Shetland and Norway too, and we've got this long cultural, friendship that we want to maintain. But our first call is to say to the governments in this country, it is time to put the record straight. It's time to actually start supporting these peripheral areas because we need to get our funding correct, but we also need to get the value in there for economic opportunity, because around us there is so much opportunity in the seas for offshore wind, for fish farming, for fishing, and it's time for us to be recognised for these things too.
James, the soundings out of Downing Street yesterday were quite dismissive, like, oh, look, this is a bit of a nonsense, really. I just want to get from you just finally what the feeling is. I mean, you're a councilman, it's your job to get the best for the people you represent. What about the people you represent? How are they feeling? How are the ordinary people of Orkney feeling about this?
Well, I think as a council leader, we're in the vanguard. We are seeking what's going to happen in the future, and the future looks pretty bleak if we can't get people on and off our islands. If we can't maintain services, it's looking really challenging, and it's for us to go into that place to challenge government to make sure that we get equity.
Well, that vote taking place 10:30 today. We will look with interest to see which way things go. I see Norway have declined to comment on the whole issue, so perhaps they don't want you. Who knows what the outcome might be in all of this, but it's been very interesting to talk to you, James Stocken. He's the leader of Orkney Council. Thanks for talking to us.
Keep well. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So, there you are.
There you are. I'm not convinced. I can see what their grievances are. I can absolutely see what their grievances are, and perhaps this will be a wake-up call to Westminster, to Edinburgh, to try and help them out a bit, because they're obviously unhappy and we don't want to lose them. I'm not convinced it's a real option, if I'm honest.
Well, after the Met Office confirmed that last month was the hottest June on record, let's see what the coming days have in store.
Good morning. It stays rather changeable across the UK as we head through the next few days, with some further showers to come through today. There will be some sunshine in between, but it will still be staying rather cool for the early part of July. We look at the pressure pattern then, it's still low pressure dominating our weather. Some fairly tightly packed isobars as well. That's what's keeping things fairly breezy. And these weather fronts here that you can see, that's what's going to bring some more organised bands of showery rain as we head through Tuesday. So looking a bit more detail then, we pick up on some fairly heavy showery rain affecting some southern counties of England and Wales. That pepping up as we head through the morning. Some organised showery rain affecting parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. That will slowly spread its way southwards. But in between the two, there will be some sunshine with just one or two scattered showers. And that rain really continuing across the southeastern corner as we head into the middle part of the afternoon, turning a little bit brighter though from the west. Temperatures still on the cool side, like I said. We're looking at highs of 14 across northern Scotland to 20 or 21 degrees in the south, and feeling particularly cool underneath that showery rain. Now, as we head through the evening then, that rain pepping up for a time across the far southeast before it then clears away. Elsewhere, probably many of the showers will fade away, one or two continuing as we head through the night, but under those clear skies it will turn fairly cool for many of us, particularly in more countryside, where we're looking at lows in towns and cities of 7 to 14 degrees there in the south. So we get for many areas to a brighter start on Wednesday morning with some sunshine from the word go. A better start to the day across the south of England and Wales. I think as we head through the day, the chance of some showers developing once again. These again could be on the heavy side with the risk of hail and thunder, but in between those showers, as I said, some further sunshine to come. Winds won't be quite as strong as they have been of late, and so in any sunshine it shouldn't feel too bad despite the fact temperatures just below where they should be. Highs of 13 across Orkney and Shetland to 21 degrees there across the southeast. Quick look ahead to the rest of the week. It stays rather changeable with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but as we head through the week, temperatures start to warm up across the southeast. We could see highs of 26 degrees there by the time we get through to Friday.
Right, coming up, more on accusations that supermarkets are treating you like a cash cow. It's found they're charging 6p more a litre for petrol than they should be. Where's all that money going? Is it just pure profit for them, and are you the victim?
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. The energy watchdog threatens action against suppliers who put shareholders over people.
Good morning, welcome to the programme. It's 9 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 4th of July. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Wherever you are, thank you for your company and leading the news on this Tuesday?
Yes, I had to think about that.
Yes. Ofgem is urging energy providers to put their customers first over shareholders. It's an open letter, and the regulator's chief executive said business practices that led to the collapse of 20 suppliers last year would not be tolerated.
It comes as the government accuses supermarkets of treating customers like cash cows after the Competition and Markets Authority found drivers were being charged an extra 6p per litre.
The government's small boats bill has hit another setback, suffering 11 defeats in the House of Lords. Last month saw channel crossings at record levels, 11,000 people making the journey so far this year.
Banks are facing a Treasury investigation amid concerns they're closing accounts of customers with controversial views. The City Minister's been tasked with looking into it following allegations from Nigel Farage that his account was shut on political grounds.
And after the Met Office confirms that June was the hottest month on record, well, it wasn't really. It equalled 1940, 1976, and last June, all on the same level. We'll bring you the latest weather update.
Rather showery picture across the UK over the last few days, but it's going to be settling down anytime soon. Find out all the detail with me here on GB News.
So it is our top story this hour. Ofgem is urging energy providers to put their customers first over shareholders when it comes to financial stability.
The regulator's chief executive said business practices that led to the collapse of 20 suppliers at the start of the Ukraine war would not be tolerated.
Well, let's get the views and all of this and the rest of the day's news with the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden. Good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. Thanks for withstanding the rain in Westminster there for us.
I thought it was going to be a gorgeous day, Pat. That's a complete shock to me. I thought he's screening his head from the sun. That's what I thought you were doing.
You see, we watch the forecast how many times a morning and we don't notice the details, do we? But listen, I want to talk to you, if it's OK, first of all, about this Ofgem rap on the knuckles, I suppose, with the energy suppliers saying, hang on a minute, stop passing on all of your profits to shareholders and give a break to your customers. It's kind of the theme of the day, isn't it? We're also seeing it with the banks pass on interest rates as well, and the Competition and Market Authority saying supermarkets pass it on to customers as well. Does anyone take any notice of all of these warnings, or are these just good words, strong words?
Well, if there's a theme today, it's that maybe regulators are waking up to some of the practices that have been taking place for a while. And you're right, it's spreading across several stories. It's also been a feature of what's happened in the water industry over the years, where companies have been loaded up with debt, and yet big dividend payments have been paid out rather than as much of the debt as possible going to investment in the modernisation of the service, which is what should have happened. So this is a theme. I think the regulators are very late to be waking up, but of course it is right that owners be responsible and make sure that the financing of these companies isn't just financial engineering to trade off debt and dividends, and that the investment that we need, and if you take electricity generation, for example, we're going to need huge investment over the coming years as we shift from fossil fuels to cleaner forms of energy. So it's really important that the regulator is strong on this, even if it's a bit late in the day.
It's not late in the day for more devolution, and later today, in a speech to the Local Government Association annual conference, your deputy party leader, Angela Rayner, has that as her theme. What do you think, Pat, she's trying to get across? What's the message?
The message is that local leaders often know more about what's going on than a minister in Whitehall. And if I could use the opportunity just to send my condolences to the family of our local leader in Wolverhampton City Council, Councillor Ian Brookfield, who passed away over the weekend. Great local leaders like him, they know what's going on in their local areas. So when it comes to things like skills policy and local labour markets and regeneration, we want to empower local leaders to be able to do more. It's not a night and day change. There's been some of this in recent years. We've had the development of elected mayors in many parts of the country. We want to build on what's been done to make sure that local leaders are properly empowered to influence their local area. And I think we can get better results by doing that.
Can I get your reaction to some breaking news that's just coming in the last few moments in relation to mortgage rates? We're hearing from the Financial Information Company that the average mortgage rate for a 5-year fixed deal has now risen to 6.01%. Meanwhile, the average 2-year fixed rate mortgage has increased to 6.47%. This is according to Money Facts. What's your reaction to that this morning? A lot of people are very concerned to see that.
Well, it's very concerning, and it's like rolling financial thunder, this. The rates are going up and up, particularly over the past month or so. And every month, there's about 200,000 more people coming off a 2 or a 5-year fixed rate. It might have been fixed in the past at something like 2%. And they're now coming on to the kind of rates that you've just quoted. It's going to cost families hundreds of pounds a month when they renew these deals, and it's really going to squeeze their spending in other areas. And it's not just mortgage holders, it's also renters too, because they're renting from people whose mortgages are also going up. So this is evidence of a really tough squeeze on both mortgage holders and renters throughout the country.
But how would you tackle that? How would Labour tackle this issue?
Well, the Bank of England sets interest rates. It's important that they're allowed to do their job and that politicians don't start second-guessing the bank. So that's the first part of it. But the best way to tackle it in the long term is for proper financial stability. That's what we've said will be at the core of our economic programme. We saw what happened when you have financial instability with the disastrous Tory mini-budget last September that really put rocket fuel under the mortgage rates. And in the short term, we came out before the government did actually last week saying that banks have got to show forbearance to people who are in trouble, got to give them options like going on to interest-only payments or extending the term of the loan. We've got to do everything we can in the short term to make sure that people don't lose their homes, because the people with mortgages haven't done anything wrong. They work hard to own their own home, and now they find themselves getting hit with these huge increases that you just announced a couple of minutes ago.
Pat, there's something that Labour is announcing that I'm scratching my head a little bit here on, maybe because I didn't have a nursery education, but more graduate teachers would be parachuted into nurseries under plans being considered by Labour to boost education for the under fours. This is a story in The Guardian. If true, why do you need graduates to teach babies under 4?
Oh, I think you're being a wee bit negative about that, Eamonn, if I may say. It's really important for young children to be given the best possible start in life. And when it doesn't happen, you have this gap between sometimes the poorest children and better off children by the time they even start school. So if you're going to give every child the best possible chance in life, you need really high quality early years education. Now, we used to have, when we were in government, the Sure Start programme that was aimed at doing that, but that's been chipped away and eroded over the years, and it's leaving us more unequal. So I'm in favour of really high quality nursery education because I think it's a great leveller. So I think this is something we should be really positive about.
Finally, Pat McFadden, I can't let you go without a word on Sue Gray. I know that Labour's dismissed this Cabinet Office investigation that was led by the Civil Service as Mickey Mouse nonsense. But do you see why a lot of people view that as hypocrisy, given the stance that Harriet Harman's Privileges Committee very much took the view that anyone undermining processes, you know, within Parliament, within government, is undemocratic?
Well, the point is the Cabinet Office issue wasn't the process. The process is a thing called a COBA, which stands for the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments, and they looked into it. They're the proper people who look into things when civil servants move on, and they found nothing wrong. They said that there was nothing unusual in what Sue Gray did in discussing future employment with a future employer, that there was no evidence that anything had breached her impartiality duties and that the new appointment could go ahead. They were the proper people to look at this. They did look at it and they found nothing wrong.
But then are you saying you don't have faith in the civil service? I mean, the civil service led this investigation and they say that their own code of conduct was broken, a prima facie breach of the rules.
Well, I gather the civil service said this shouldn't be published, but ministers decided to. I've got every faith in the civil service. I think we are fortunate to have a strong civil service. You won't find me or my party trying to undermine the civil service. I think you'll find that the accusations in that direction have come from the other end of politics in recent years, and it's always this thing about blaming somebody else. Used to be Brussels, then it was this thing called the blob. Sometimes it's the Bank of England, sometimes it's the civil service. It's not a game that we played, but you get a lot of it from the government, sadly.
Okay. Okay. Pat McFadden, appreciate your time today. Thank you for braving the rain. Always a pleasure. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Up next, Britain's newsroom at 9:30. Let's find out what Andrew and Bev have in store.
He was the only one holding a brolly. Did you notice that?
We were looking, going, why has Pat McFadden got an umbrella and nobody else?
Do you know what? In fairness, probably if it stopped raining, multitasking, listening, answering questions, taking umbrella down, live television.
Big question of the day.
Big
question
issues.
of the day.
Sorry,
Why didn't you
We were
ask
debating what shoes people wear to garden parties in Hollywood earlier. We asked the incisive questions, always.
Quite right.
So what have you got for us?
Rip off Britain.
Yeah, we've all suspected, haven't we, that there's price gouging going on with organisations, shops and retailers. We've heard now petrol, we've been overcharged.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at that, aren't we, this morning?
Supermarkets in the dock. And, of course, you've been talking to Pat McFadden about that, the banks being called in by the regulator because it's amazing how quickly they shove up interest rates on mortgages but don't do the same on savings rates.
They're just getting summoned.
Yeah.
It's the same story over and over again. They're all getting called in meetings, urged to do this, warned to do this.
I don't think the regulator's got any power to compel them to do anything.
No. It's the ULEZ judicial review this morning, trying to establish whether it has been fair of Sadiq Khan to expand the ULEZ. That's at 10 o'clock this morning, so we're going to have people at court there. That's a big story, particularly for London, but of course ULEZ is also another city.
And lots of people drive into London, so it's probably going to catch 1 million or so people, extra people, and it's a £12.50. It's a stealth tax, that's what it is. It's to try and fill the big black hole in Transport for London's finances. £400 million he's levied in fines already, and that's before it's expanded.
Has it cleaned the air, though?
No.
There we go.
No, it's caused worse congestion.
That's it. We've just
and also, we know that when cars are nose to bumper, the pollution goes up.
Yeah.
His figures are very dodgy on all of this, the mayor's.
Well, that's what will be unravelled in court this morning, so we're going to be looking at that. And 6 months today since Rishi Sunak promised his 5 pledges, so we're going to be seeing how well
he's sunk on the boats, isn't he?
Yeah,
that's going nowhere.
And inflation, I'm afraid, because he's supposed to halve it. He might get
it's only July.
Exactly.
We live in hope.
And growing the economy. No.
He might get the inflation down, but the boat's no chance.
No, it's not going to happen, is it? And that's
NHS waiting lists.
That's going to be a big vote loser if he doesn't.
I was reading at the weekend about how he was complaining that he's not been feeling love, that he's been not getting enough love. He's always been taught that if he works hard enough and he's clever, then he should have results, but not so in politics.
Imagine the naivety.
Tough old business.
I wouldn't want to do the job, I must say.
No, I wouldn't either. But he'll be all right when it's all over.
Indeed.
Yeah, he will.
Got a very rich wife, don't he?
Thanks, guys.
Bev, Andrew, thank you.
Very much indeed. So, government small boats, which is what we were talking about there, it's got a big setback yesterday, 11 defeats in the House of Lords last night.
And as we know, last month saw exceptional weather. It led to lots of illegal crossings of the Channel. 11,000 people have made that journey, dangerous journey, already so far this year. Well, let's speak to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. He's in Westminster for us this morning. Good morning to you, Tom. Look, this may not be a sort of fatal blow in the immigration bill because the MPs can overturn it, but it delays things, doesn't it, from the government's point of view? What were the changes and amendments, the 11 of them, that were imposed in the Lords yesterday?
Yes, 11 different amendments passed by the Lords. The government, of course, doesn't have a majority in the upper house. Around 2/3 of peers are not Conservative members, so it's fairly easy for that house these days to change and pick at pieces of legislation sent to it by the House of Commons. But some of those 11 different amendments might come under a fair bit of scrutiny. One in particular that's been generating quite a bit of attention is this idea about modern slavery laws. The immigration bill intends to change the way in which they're applied. Of course, Theresa May famously brought in the Modern Slavery Act when she was Prime Minister, which boosted up the protections of people who could be considered to be under modern slavery, trafficking and the rest of it. It will be an interesting idea to see if Theresa May herself actually supports that Lord's amendment when it comes back to to the Commons. But for the most part, the expectation is that the government, with its majority and with stopping the boats being one of its 5 pledges, the 5 big ideas of Rishi Sunak announced 6 months ago to the day today, it's likely that all 11 of those amendments will struggle to pass the Commons, and yet again this bill will be pinged back to the Lords in what's known as parliamentary ping-pong. But whilst that's going on in the building behind me, June saw the highest number of small boat arrivals on record. Almost 4,000 of them, 3,800 plus, that arrived in the month of June. That's the highest that has ever been recorded. However, across the 6 months to the year today, the number is slightly down 10% on the previous year. So all in all, the jury's out as to whether or not these numbers will come down by the end of the year.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Next, are young people getting more boring? We're going to be talking about a new lifestyle trend taking over TikTok as Generation Z flocks.
Z, is
it?
Ugh.
Is it?
Sorry, no, it's just a personal irritation. People call it Gen Z.
Yeah. But is it?
I'm sure in America it's Gen Z, but it's Generation Z.
Okay, Generation Z. What does Generation Z even mean?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. Young people. Those youngsters.
Their little bones are hardly formed.
Exactly.
But anyway, they're all influencers and they will show what is normal to be exciting, mundane, some people may call it, but this is the new norm. This is the new excitement.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, the new lifestyle trend taking over TikTok isn't a glamorous existence filled with travel, luxury and excess.
Young people are living their best lives by wearing matching pyjama sets, working out at 5 o'clock in the morning and lighting candles.
By most measures, these activities aren't extremely exciting, but TikToks of bedtime routines, trips to coffee shops or even just lists of ways to romanticise your life have become very popular.
Very popular, but maybe mundane. So why has mundane become aspirational? Zoe Maya of Maya Wellco joins us now. And you're just slightly too old to be part of Generation Z.
Yes.
What do you make of what is trending on TikTok, or what is coming to the fore about leading a young life?
Well, I think I am actually too old because I don't even have TikTok. I'm more of an Instagram person. But I think, I think during actually lockdown, this whole kind of movement to wellness played a big part in the sense that it wasn't so much of going out anymore, and we were trying to create these, really enjoyable moments in our lives at home, with, having a lovely bath and waking up and doing your yoga or Pilates practice first thing in the morning. And I think a lot of influencers, wellness influencers and role models out there have been incorporating this in their life, and young people are aspiring to that sort of lifestyle.
So they're shunning, sex, drugs and rock and roll, which, traditionally is what the young used to indulge in.
Exactly.
Do you think that perhaps they're missing out?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the type of person you are. I obviously think it's important to, have that sort of experience when you're young, potentially for some people, but maybe it's, not...
It's not essential.
Exactly.
Yeah. There is another way and there are other things. And, it's interesting.
I guess it's, about what brings you joy.
Yeah.
And maybe some people think it's boring to go to bed early or to wake up early and do your...
You see, I begin to smile because as I reflect on my own life with this sort of thing, I was always repulsed by getting drunk and throwing up. When the amount of people who say, "Oh yeah, we got wasted last night."
Yeah,
we did
there's
this, we
nothing
did that.
worse.
Yeah.
And then they would spend 5 days out of action.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand the attraction.
Well, I think it is interesting that people have woken up to the health risks associated with binge drinking.
Yes.
Because there was the ladette culture and all the girls started drinking like the boys, and I personally always found that just really gross.
Yeah.
So I'm all for beige.
Yeah.
I'm all for Instagram being beige and everything being a bit boring, but then I'm 40, so maybe that's part of maybe I've been there and done that.
Yeah.
But are youngsters today, even at your age, I mean, you're in your early 30s, but, are 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds different type people than Isabel would have been, than I would have been?
Yeah.
Are they gentler, kinder? Are they... how do you think you would describe them generally?
Well, I don't have many young 20-year-old friends, but I actually have a lot of... I built a wellness platform and I offer Pilates and retreats through that. And I have actually a lot of young, early 20s people as members who are actually interested in this sort of stuff, and they come along to my retreats. And I actually find it really inspiring how... Because I know when I was in my early 20s, I wasn't actually thinking about this sort of stuff. And maybe they're just more in touch with their emotions, or what makes them feel good.
Well, I think you're right. I think whatever it is, or whether you're sex, drugs, rock and roll, or lighting candles or whatever, it's whatever makes you feel good. That's ultimately the aim, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly, and rather than feeling that peer pressure to go out and get really drunk and you wake up the next day feeling anxious, that doesn't make you feel good.
Yeah. Peer pressure is such a corrosive thing, isn't it? If the peer pressure is to go and do Pilates, then we're all laughing. We can't argue with that, even if it is a bit dull. So, Maya, we have to leave it there. Yes. Thank you very much. You're an advert for wellness. You look glowing this morning, especially given what you told us in the break, because you've had an 11-month-old baby and you've been up all night. So, well done you.
Thanks for having me.
That baby gets up at 3 a.m, so do we. So we'll be back here tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Up next,
Bev and Andrew with Britain's Newsroom.
Have a good day.
Morning, welcome. There's a lot going on. We've got a huge amount on the show today. The ULEZ decision is in court. Sadiq Khan will have to defend his idea to expand ULEZ.
Yeah, which is just we know it is, it's a stealth tax. Also, rip off Britain, the supermarkets in the dock for ripping us off over petrol, and the banks over interest rates.
GBNews' campaign as well. Don't kill cash. More of that. Don't go anywhere.
Good morning. It stays rather changeable across the UK as we head through the next few days, with some further showers to come through today. There will be some sunshine in between, but it will still be staying rather cool for the early part of July. We look at the pressure pattern then, it's still low pressure dominating our weather. Some fairly tightly packed isobars as well. That's what's keeping things fairly breezy. And these weather fronts here that you can see, that's what's going to bring some more organised bands of showery rain as we head through Tuesday. So looking a bit more detail then, we pick up some fairly heavy showery rain affecting some southern counties of England and Wales. That pepping up as we head through the morning. Some organised showery rain affecting parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. That will slowly spread its way southwards. But in between the two, there will be some sunshine with just 1 or 2 scattered showers. And that rain really continuing across the southeastern corner as we head into the middle part of the afternoon, turning a little bit brighter though from the west. Temperatures still on the cool side, like I said. We're looking at highs of 14 across northern Scotland to 20 or 21 degrees in the south. And feeling particularly cool underneath that showery rain. Now, as we head through the evening then, that rain pepping up for a time across the far southeast before it then clears away. Elsewhere, probably many of the showers will fade away, 1 or 2 continuing as we head through the night, but under those clear skies it will turn fairly cool for many of us, particularly in more countryside, where we're looking at lows in towns and cities of 7 to 14 degrees there in the south. So we get up for many areas to a brighter start on Wednesday morning with some sunshine from the word go. A better start to the day across the south of England and Wales. I think as we head through the day, the chance of some showers developing once again. These again could be on the heavy side with the risk of hail and thunder, but in between those showers, as I said, some further sunshine to come. Winds won't be quite as strong as they have been of late, and so in any sunshine it shouldn't feel too bad despite the fact temperatures just below where they should be. Highs of 13 across Orkney and Shetland to 21 degrees there across the southeast. Quick look ahead to the rest of the week. It stays rather changeable with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but as we head through the week, temperatures start to warm up across the southeast. We could see highs of 26 degrees there by the time we get through to Friday.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.